thought, right, I bought myself a nice Aston Martin. I pulled up on the lights alongside Roy Keane, of all people, and I had the shades on. I think I was listening to some speed garage. My arm was out the window. I was having myself. And then Roy gave me that look that he's given many a people in his time. And as he sped off into the distance, I was sitting in this car, looked at myself in the mirror and thought, I need to get rid of this.
Off the Ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
It's 7:30 a.m. on Tuesday, the 21st of April. You're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger and Eoin and Eoin Sheehan here with you all the way until 10 o'clock. We're here every morning from 7:30 until 10 during lockdown. We might start a little bit earlier when everybody gets back to the new normal or whatever that's going to look like in future. Share us your lockdown stories. Use the hashtag OTBAM. You can follow us on Twitter. @OffTheBallAM is the Twitter handle for this specific show. Of course, you can just use the usual Twitter handle as well, @OffTheBall. Or you can leave a comment in any of the live streams that you're watching this on. Best place to watch this is on our website, offtheball.com. You can also get us on YouTube, and we broadcast on Periscope. You can Chromecast it to your TV, so, no need for you to sit on your couch and be humiliated by Joe Wicks. You can spend the mornings with us instead, and we promise not to humiliate you, unless, of course, you think Kerry were the team of the naughties. Right. Here's what's coming up on the show this morning for you. Brian O'Driscoll and Ronan O'Gara, we've given them the task of looking back at the game in Chicago for our Classic Game Club, so that's coming your way in just a moment. The sports page is going to run through those with Owen just after 8 o'clock this morning. Top 5 stories of the day that we're covering here on Off the Ball and offtheball.com. Treasa Ní Cheallaigh is, of course, an off-the-baller and has been there for the last couple of years. But as well as that, she's also a trainee doctor who has been working in St James's Hospital over the course of the last while. So we'll get her story from the front line. And then Off the Bull, is that what they're calling it? It's a look at The Last Dance, the 10-part documentary series, which is a co-production between ESPN and Netflix, or at least it's an ESPN production that Netflix are broadcasting in this part of the world. So we all get to see it. And that is Kieran Donaghy, Jarlath Regan, Ronan Mullen and Owen Sheehan talking about the final season of the Chicago Bulls when Phil Jackson and Michael Jordan were together for the very last time as they went hunting greatness. So that's coming your way between 9 and 10 this morning. If you have any comments, if you'd like to get anything off your chest, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Let's get into this though. Very special Classic Game Club. Brian O'Driscoll and Ronan O'Gara sat down and watched Ireland's historic first ever win over New Zealand in Chicago in 2016. Enjoy.
Do you know what? It felt like a freebie. There was no real expectation on the Irish team. I think that was coming in 2 weeks' time when they had the All Blacks back in Dublin. We obviously let the one slip in 2013. So there was a feeling that they had them in their sights more so than ever before, and were lining them up for that game. So it did feel like a bit of a freebie, and certainly my expectation wasn't that they were going to get a victory, but that we were going to have a good weekend, irrespective, because of what was going on in the city itself.
I think subsequent to that, Joe Schmidt is pretty much on the record as saying that was his expectation of the two matches as well, that Chicago, they hadn't done a huge amount of training for it. The efforts were very much focused on November 19th. And that sense of a freebie was almost there for the players to some extent as well, as much as it can be against New Zealand.
Yeah, but, you still have to play scared against New Zealand anytime. We've been on the losing end of enough defeats and bad defeats to sharpen the mind. And, the last thing you want to do is give up the first game and focus on a second one, because confidence will take a knocking, and the wind will take it out of your sails, and it'll just reinforce those negative doubts that might have been, that have lingered for a long, long time up to that point, because we'd never actually managed to get the job done. So, they obviously went over with the knowledge of a freebie of going and playing and executing a game plan and playing in the opposition's faces defensively. It was a huge focus. It was one of Andy Farrell's first games. Am I right in saying that? Maybe it was his first season anyway. So defensively, they were incredible, and the foundation of the performance was built on that crazy line speed and forcing lots of New Zealand errors. So it was definitely one that it felt as though you grew as the game went. But we've seen it lots of times before, and I've been involved in games where we've had a 15, 20 point lead and they've come back, and they had a sniff of doing that, but this was the first time that Ireland were able to soak up that pressure and then counter with their own.
So that's the overall kind of context. It's not that long ago in the memory, so people probably remember it pretty well. Moment of the match is our first big talking point. Ronan, what are you going for? What's your moment of this match?
I think, is it after 42 minutes? It might be a strange moment, but I think it was New Zealand had an entry to try and get back into the game, and I think it was someone spilled the ball, I forget, put a good shot on, the ball popped out, and Andrew Trimble got a turnover ball, and a lot of times you expect the winner to probably have a go, even though he's 10 meters from his line. What he did actually was put a great kick from his right boot to the right touch line. Got touch, I think, about 8 meters inside the New Zealand half, and you got a close shot of all the Irish players, their kind of body language and the joy, essentially, of them going forward and running on to kind of have a set piece in New Zealand's half. Because up to that, for me, I think what was different in this game is that I don't think we've ever seen a New Zealand team so ill-disciplined and so inaccurate in terms of they couldn't win a line-out. Potentially down to the 2 second rows that are playing, but for the best team in the world, they could not establish any foothold in the game, and their discipline was as poor as I would say any All-Black team was. So from that regard, for Ireland to get to 25-8 up, it seems a crazy thing to say, but actually Ireland didn't have to use anywhere near as much energy as they would have on other occasions, even against teams that wouldn't be as good as New Zealand. New Zealand, their high shots, their lack of discipline in terms of tackling people in the air, it was staggering when you actually do a cold analysis of it, which I did. And that's, I think, essentially how Ireland got over the line this time, because it got back to 33-29, 17 minutes to go. And I think everyone in the stadium is thinking, oh, here we go again. This is only going one way. And a potential other moment of the match could be, I think, Donaghy Ryan holding up Bowden Barrett and stripping the ball off him in a tackle, turnover, and Ireland go the length of the pitch. So there was, in that regard, I think Ireland had to win the game a few times. They had them dead and buried a few times, but as we know, because of New Zealand's skill level, it was a firm pitch, a dry ball, their skills are exquisite. They're never dead. I think we saw, was it Scott Barrett came on for his first cap, and just a little bit of footwork to beat Devon on an inside shoulder, goes through Rob Kearney as if he isn't there. Try, like, they're capable of doing things, as we know, that other teams aren't. But I think, the moment of the match for me, I'm more...
3 moments of the match.
Yeah, 3 more. I would say it would be the scrum on the right-hand side, that led to Robbie Henshaw's try.
You can't steal that one on me.
Okay.
You've had three. You've had three.
Well, obviously there was a build-up. I think I'll go with Trimby. So that I think, just to give them belief in terms of... I still thought in that game, as good as the weather was, I think if you look at it from a close angle, the joy in the forwards' faces when they could see the ball being put in front of them and kicked out, I think it was a real victory for probably set-piece rugby, in the fact that I think, I'm harping on here, but I think Donaghy Ryan had a big game, a big game. And I think sometimes he has been missed, and that's obviously with the benefit of hindsight. But I think when you spend all your career with him and you kind of go coach him, you understand that there's a phenomenal brain there and he gets it. But I think he got into what was the starting hooker's name, Brian, again?
Was it Coles was starting? No?
Yeah, Dan Coles. Exactly, Dan Coles. He just couldn't. Dane Coles couldn't get him out of his head for the whole game, and that was basically the winning of the game, that they shut down their line-out, I think.
When I was watching the game back and I saw Trimby's kick, I was like, "Well, I've never seen that before." So I sent him a text immediately saying, "Is that your best kick you've ever delivered on a rugby pitch in your entire life?" And the funny thing, you talk about the shot of the forwards. He was rewarded by a long hold on Devon Toner running to that line out. I was like, he didn't even get the proper credit for it. But it was a phenomenal moment of pressure valve being released where they were under the pump, and then it must have been a 55, 60 meter gain. And it just felt as though they were able to kind of reset themselves and recalibrate and go again. So I think that is a great one. I think there's so many great moments in it. I think I don't want to pick negatively. I think, you know, you talk about the ill discipline of the All Blacks. I thought after the Ben Smith try off the kickoff, Dane Coles gave away a penalty on on Rob Kearney, and instead of going for that was the penalty then that Murray knocked over that made it an 11-point game. And I just think that's a very un-All Black type thing, to score points and then give up 3 easy points where they could really put the foot down. But I think I have to pick. I'm not going to pick 3. I'm going to pick 2. So I'm going to pick that one from a negative All Black perspective, but yet Ireland and Conor Murray having the wherewithal to stand up and kick what's expected a 30, 40 meter penalty right in front, but him not being the regular goal kicker and managing to do that. But I thought that scrum deep in our own territory, the double miss pass out to Simon Zebo, the quality kick, and then the chase, particularly from Conor Murray and Robbie Henshaw, was unbelievable. And that was the winning of the game. They don't score the try. Okay, it's still all to play for, but to have an 80 meter turnaround and to get your possession for a 5 meter scrum, and then to score it, is just a remarkable piece of skill that we'll be able to look back on and realise that was all the pressure. That made it an 8-point game with four minutes to go, and even the All Blacks, it was going to be beyond them at that point. So I'm picking the quality of the skill of good scrum, 3 great passes, scrum half, out half, centre, Jared Payne out to Zebo, great kick, and then the intent in the kick chase was extraordinary. And you have to remember, like, the impact that Murray put in, and it was Julian Sevilla behind his own line, single-handedly absolutely melted him. So yeah, I think that was the moment of the game.
Could have been Conor's finest 80 minutes. I think is, like, when you think of the other moments that stand out, the kind of Ireland, there was a traditional Gary Eoin where Johnny hit a 5-second hang time. Gary Eoin hopped off the ground, bounced up another 15. Conor beats Bodie Barrett for the ball, comes back to Ireland, and that, I think, gives him another scoring opportunity. He's capacitating to scan for the try when he sees that Aaron Smith is probably a metre off pillar and he's trying to cover too much, and he just says, I'll be taking that clean through. But it just, as you said, his capacity to step up and nail a kick. But defensively, himself and Henshaw were Trojans.
Well, even Stander, sorry, Joe, and to the end of it, even, do you think that Murray noticed that Stander had played deep in that ruck before his snipe? He'd obviously identified that Aaron Smith was at that kind of 1.5 defender rather than at the guard.
Oh yeah, he had a double sniff. I think.
But did he see that his teammate was playing long in the ruck as well, and giving him a potential little screen for him to make a little dart if, to stop that negative defender on the the ruck getting around.
Yeah, I'd say that's all the detail they look into. That isn't by chance that happens, and I think they most definitely kind of were. It's easy to say New Zealand's discipline or lack of discipline thereof, but I think the analysis from that team would have been that if you keep the ball and get through phases, that, Owen Franks and Joe Moody, hopefully Squire was new to that level as well. I know Moody and Franks are very established, but just in terms of the high shots, like he was lucky that yellow card. It could have been a red, but like it was just
red now, isn't it? Yeah, that's 2 yellows, definitely now.
And also on the plus side, I think for Ireland, what was big was probably, you alluded to it earlier, I think the quality of Johnny's restarts to give Rob Kearney the potential to win the ball. These are the little things that make a massive difference. I think also when Ireland had penalties, Johnny squeezed every yard out of his line kick and makes such a massive difference. You know, you ask a forward in terms of like sometimes if you hit a 20 or 30 metres up the line, but at that day I think it was probably 45 minimum. So Ireland didn't have to, in terms of New Zealand, probably didn't help themselves, obviously, but like if you have a penalty 10 metres outside your 22 and your next phase of play is 10 metres outside their 22, it changes all the calling structure and changes the belief for your team. So
that one for the Jordy Murphy try was a 58-metre penalty find from Johnny, you know, to 7 metres out, and what that does to a pack, you know, just puffs the chest up and gives
especially with Reynal refereeing, I think, you know, in terms of it's very hard to stop them all now that gets going after 3 metres. And I think with Donaghy Ryan, with Devin Toner there, with Bestie there, I think they had a good idea where they wanted to go after them, because essentially defending the maul, the second rows have huge roles to do with that. And I think they identified in New Zealand that I suppose, key intellectual property rights of their pack was missing.
Next heading, fellas, is secret man of the match. I'm presuming Conor Murray got the actual man of the match. It's actually quite hard to find. Rob Kearney did? Okay. So
I can remember it was the game that Joe Schmidt apparently said to him, "I need a big one from you."
Yeah.
Because the pressure's coming on. You know, you'd had maybe subpar performances, you know, with Leinster and with Ireland for a while. Maybe not the same level of consistency in the 6 or 8 months prior to that. So, you know, for Joe to put it to him and for him to respond is pretty something.
Beyond his usual self and being solid and everything else, his break for the CJ Stander try was very eye-catching, brilliant, quick feet, and must have made about 10, 15 metres close to the try line.
Yeah, Rob has always been a hole runner, and sometimes it's worked, and sometimes to his detriment, he hasn't gotten the timing right. We look back to the All Black game where, you know, the third try in the World Cup this year, he tried to hole run when it wasn't on, but yet you flip that and look at when it was really important, and that was one of the most perfect examples you'll ever find, where, you know, he was running super hard, and I think it was maybe as a decoy. But yet he had to be a viable option because there was something going on out the back as well. And that was the whole thing about trying to confuse the defender. I think it might have been Cruden, I'm not entirely sure. But had one eye out the back and then didn't realise front door was an option. And that's why he ran a great line, then good footwork, good ball placement, and then CJ pick and jam from half a metre and just keeping that momentum going. So
is Conor Murray the not-so-secret man of the match then?
I think you could pick... Do you know what? You could pick loads of them. I thought Robbie Henshaw was brilliant. I thought Donaghy Ryan was excellent. CJ Stander was brilliant. In a victory against the All Blacks, you're going to have no subpar performers. It's the reality of it. You know, Simon Zebo had some brilliant moments in the game. Everyone has to perform well. If you
it was very interesting, wasn't it? I think the balance that you look at the Irish backline, and maybe we didn't see enough of that backline in terms of, there was lovely balance with Henshaw and Payne, Zebo, Kearney and Trimble. You know, I think Trim's maybe got caught once or twice ball watching, but then at the end, in a 15-minute spell, he could do no wrong. He essentially nearly won the game on his own with some brilliant reads and brilliant adjustments on the end of the line, because they were under the pump. I think also was probably...
Sorry to interrupt there, Rod. What was the balance? Why was that a balanced backline?
It just, on this performance, it looked, I think, the serenity Jared Payne brings, I think, in terms of, he seems very composed. He's not a man for glaring misreads. It's a very important position at 13, especially defending against New Zealand, in terms of just not taking their bait to shoot out of the line and come after them. I think I thought watching it back, Robbie Henshaw was incredible. It's the first 40 minutes I think was the best I've seen him play, but also I think then how he finished the game. So for me, Ireland nearly had to win the game twice, and it was like you had the established core of your Rory Best, your Donaghy Ryan, Jamie Heaslip, Conor Murray, Johnny Sexton, Jared Payne, Henshaw, Rob Kearney, Trimble, Zebo. But then the guys who actually had to nearly re-win the match with, like Johnny went off after 58. That's 22 minutes for Joey Carberry to come in. You had Finlay Bealham, you had Ultan Delan, you had a lot of guys that probably weren't used to this, and it was fellas like at the end of the game, Sean Cronin, people like that had given a lot, just the emotion on their face. But like, it was, I think, an 11-point game after Conor put Ireland ahead, but like 11 points with 22 minutes to go against New Zealand on a dry pitch.
Precarious enough, yeah.
Correct. And then it went to 33-20 with 17 minutes to go, wasn't it?
Yeah. I'd forgotten that, actually. The next thing we're going to talk about is most jarring moment, and that was the most jarring thing for me. I hadn't remembered New Zealand had got to within 4 points with 15 minutes to go. That it was that close and that uncomfortable. If I had to push you, then who's your secret man of the match in a name? Who are you giving it to?
I'll give it to Robbie Henshaw.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, I'd probably have to give it to Robbie Henshaw as well. I thought he was outstanding. I thought it was a defensive masterclass with the centres. Sorry, except for one mistake. Robbie made a mistake for the first try, the Naholo try, after 4 minutes, because he tried to play so aggressively and just got caught on a good line. But the understanding between him and Jared Payne.
Jeez, that's harsh, is it not? No, Holo. It was such a good line. Amazing line.
He did. He picked the good. Listen.
But sure, it was. I saw Ben Smith wins it in the air, isn't it? Aaron Smith to Bodie hits Crotty hits Naholo on an absolute ripper, and he goes by.
But it was the line he picked. But Henshaw's trying to play super hard to be aggressive, which worked for the rest of the game. He just got caught on that one. He got caught inside shoulder.
Okay, and who was? But was it not inside that got caught as well? No. Yeah,
but I think if he doesn't play as hard as that, he's probably better placed to get a bit of footwork and get a collision of some sort. Whereas Naholo makes a clean break, and they always finish those ones.
But they were pox to finish that one. It was a bit of head tennis, wasn't it, off Kieran Reid and.
Sorry, the other thing I want to say as well is about Jared Payne, and maybe we don't talk a lot about Jared Payne because Gary Ringrose has come in and done a great job, but Jared Payne was unbelievable for a couple of seasons for us. He was the voice in that back line that I think they subsequently missed. And I think he was the difference with Ireland going out in the quarter-final of the World Cup in 2015 and getting to a semi-final. I think people don't talk about Sexton and Paul O'Connell missing, Sean O'Brien missing, but for me, I think the big loss of that World Cup 2015 was Jared Payne at 13, because he was the foundation of that defensive system, and people didn't have an appreciation for him like he deserved.
Okay, very good. So next is most jarring, most surprising. As I mentioned, from 30 points to 8 up after 48 minutes. So 22-point lead after 48 minutes. New Zealand got it back to 4 points with 14 minutes to go. That kind of jarred with me. In terms of the game, watching it back, 4 years later, Ronan, what surprised you? What jarred with you slightly?
Repeat that question for me, Joe. Sorry, my thoughts were elsewhere.
Brian, what surprised you most about the game?
Okay, thank you. That's better. Surprised me about the game. No, go on. I lost my shot.
I think the two things. I think the aggressiveness of the first time we really saw Ireland coming out with that ferocious line speed and forcing errors. And I think it was England had previously shown it against the All Blacks of stopping them, allowing them to have any time to play. The best 10s in the world, Barrett in particular, the last thing he wants is to have no time with the ball in hand to make his decisions. He wants teams to play off and to drift and allow him to run and pick his lines and run switches and have a little go himself, playing man on straight up. And they got caught, as I said, early on with that aggressiveness, but they didn't balk, having realized it worked against them. after at the start of the game to revert to type, they stayed with it and they forced lots of errors on New Zealand. Some might say unforced errors. I think there were forced errors of handling skills in the eye line of back three players when they were gathering the ball, when they were putting pressure on kick chase, when Trimble was coming in off the wing to stop the ball, and they got caught a couple of times as well, and the hustle from inside managed to get across and save the day a few times. But I just thought that was the first time that we saw that ridiculous line speed really paying dividends.
Okay. Ronan, anything jump out at you as surprising or at odds with how you remembered it?
I wouldn't underestimate. I think it was bizarre. Was it in the 25th minute both teams lost significant players? Jordy Murphy for basically just jogging after lineout and did a 9-month reconstruction of the knee. When you watch it over and over again, it's as innocuous as you'll ever see in a sporting pitch.
I'm sorry to interrupt on that. Jordy Murphy, that was his third cap. And so I need to double check this because I just couldn't believe it was right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I misread it. Yeah, Jordy Murphy went off. Josh van der Fleer came on for his third cap in the 26th minute and ended up being Ireland's leading tackler.
Yes.
With a 26-minute head start and everyone else.
But also what probably slipped under the radar too would be the loss of Ryan Crotty. And he would be essentially like the Jarlath Payne of Ireland. He would be for New Zealand in terms of the glue of that midfield and the back line nearly, because he kind of makes them tick, and it really altered, I think, New Zealand, and the fact that we had Morola at 13 who was new, and then it was Antard Leonard-Brown coming in together, which is probably power as opposed to a kind of a detail, eyes up, where's the space, man. So it was different in terms of outside of Barrett. You had Antard Leonard-Brown, you had Moala, you had Sevilla, and you had Naholo, and then Ben Smith, the kind of rock behind them. But you can be sure that I'd say the message is passed on to the Irish team here, as Brian alluded to there, about if there's a four to go hard against. Yes, they're incredible athletes, but I think in terms of pick and moves to beat you, they may struggle, but they would have the footwork, definitely.
Okay. In terms of then a kind of a final rounding up point, the underrated heading. So this is a weird one. I don't know if this win gets all that much credit for a few reasons, because Ireland lost subsequently 2 weeks later in Dublin, because there was the nagging sense that it was a week full of promotions for New Zealand, because they were missing their second row.
I think you've got to look at the 80 minutes though, don't you?
Well, go on. So, okay. I'm just laying out how I think a lot of people.
2 weeks later is we don't know that, so we don't have that context, do we? We have to judge it on this.
No, but we have that context now. So I'm almost saying to you that that is how it's remembered. And is that fair? Is it a much better performance than I realised? Because you've both talked about New Zealand not being great. So that's where the overrated, underrated.
Not allowed to be great.
Huh?
Yeah.
Not allowed to be great. I personally think, Raj, I'll jump in if that's okay, and say I think this performance and result is massively underrated in the bigger scheme of games, Irish games in the last 125 years. It's taken us that long to win it against the All Blacks, and because it was televised, locally, I think BT had the game, so there wouldn't have been a huge amount of subscribers in Ireland anyway back in 2016. So was it 16 or 17?
16,
16.
Yeah. So I think the masses didn't get to see it, and it went under the radar too much so, and it's such a huge shame, because the manner in which Ireland won it, and as Rod said, needed to win it twice, and showed guts and balls where in the past we've fallen foul. I think that's the coming of that side, and allowed them to go on to win again against the All Blacks. And you look at the excitement of that second game in Dublin, what it generated from the rugby public, but also the public at large. That almost seems like a bigger game than the one in Soldier Field, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, because We won away, a neutral venue, but against the odds, playing unbelievable stuff, scoring 40 points against the All Blacks. And I don't care what they did during the week. That was their choice to go and do extra promotional work and whatever else. And yeah, they, were missing some players. There was lots of times that Ireland were missing players over the course of the years as well. We can't use that as an excuse. So for me, a phenomenal performance that deserved more credit.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
It was like Rog Cam every time you kicked.
Yeah, it was tough. It was, and again, what you learn from that. Myself and Dave got together after that World Cup, and I said it to him. I said there was a couple of kicks where I'm lining up and behind the posts, like Rog is there, and he said, next time that happens in a game, I said, I want you to have him as your target. And he just put the ball right between his eyes.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1. This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
Right, you're very welcome back to OTB AM. Underrated was the conclusion there between Brian Driscoll and Ronan O'Gara talking to Joe in Classic Game Club, looking back at the 2016 defeat of the All Blacks, the first ever that Ireland had managed to inflict on them in our long and storied history of defeats against them. If you want to get in touch this morning, or if you've got any views on that, 0879 180 180 is the number. Eoin Sheehan, how are you?
Very well, Ger. What's the crack?
You were in Chicago famously for that game, obviously, weren't you?
It still hurts. Still hurts to this day. What a shame. What a thing to miss out on. Donald Trump will never be elected President of the United States again. Chicago Cubs will most certainly not win the World Series in the same city that Ireland are beating the All Blacks in again. I'm confident of that much. Probably the former is more likely. But yeah, it still hurts.
Yeah, underrated, the lads think. And I can see the obvious answer is we made a bloody documentary about it. So like it certainly has become an important part of Irish sports conversations, and in rugby terms it's historical, but I do also get the sense that like people still should be going back to watch that again.
I haven't watched it since. I kind of watched it at the time. Maybe it's to do with the pain of actually not being there to see it. It is the ultimate instance of FOMO not being there.
Yeah, we had a great weekend. It was like literally one of the all-time great weekends. It was absolutely amazing. From the moment the plane arrived and the Cubs, the millions of people. So the Cubs broke an absolute, one of the greatest famines in world sports history. They broke that weekend to win the World Series. And Ireland and New Zealand walked into the middle of this giant, amazing carnival, while at the same time the Ireland team were staying in the Trump Plaza Hotel. Well, you kind of got this weird sense, I think Trump's going to win this election here. And then obviously he did.
Is it a case that the game in Dublin is actually a better game from that year?
No.
No? Okay, fair enough. I haven't watched either back, but I just felt
I mean, it might be, but no.
When you've got the All Blacks pucking the head off you, that's when you want to watch an All Blacks game back. I'm not saying they lay down in Chicago, anything but. And I'd actually be really keen to watch the performance of Joey Carberry back from that All Blacks game in Chicago. That's certainly the one thing that you kind of forget about, or that I would forget about, since I haven't watched it back ever since. And of course, you have like all the theatre beforehand, the figure of eight before kickoff. Yeah, it's got a lot of rewatchable potential, that both of those games against the All Blacks.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be on TV fairly soon, so everybody will get the opportunity to see it, and probably a bigger audience this time around.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously it will have a bigger audience this time around, and everybody will get the chance to revisit and re-rate it and put it in as one of the all-time great performances by an Irish team. One of the other things that we need to talk about right now is the Michael Jordan documentary, the 10-part series, The Last Dance, it's called. First 2 episodes dropped last night on Netflix, and the internet was aflame. Everybody loves this. They've essentially crowned this as the best thing that's ever happened.
Who's they?
They, you, and the internet.
Me? I'm not sure if I would go that far. I'm not sure about I haven't seen too many critical reviews just yet. I've just got all the reading I've done around this has been around the storylines that we've seen displayed, and it depends what you want from a documentary. Do you want to be entertained? Do you want something that looks pretty, or do you want to find out new things about people? And certainly I would kind of fall into the later category, that the most important thing for any piece of work is how much do we glean from it, and what are the new things that we learned. And on first viewing, you do feel that there isn't a whole pile of new things that you learn. It looks amazing, and the footage is fantastic, especially the new footage that's been sitting there in some shelf in Bristol, Connecticut for the last 22 years. That stuff is really, really great to look at. But what do we actually learn? Like, and I don't think that any of the anecdotes that we see, any of the new stories that are told actually tell us that much that we didn't already know. But what we do know is that Michael Jordan had like full sign off on this whole thing. And it is actually a behavior by Michael Jordan to include some of the things here. And some of the footage that we see doesn't reflect overly well, you would have thought, on Michael Jordan. Him kind of being a bit of a tyrant, for example, in practice is one of the things that sticks out to me.
Does that reflect badly on him?
But I was just about to say, he is okay with that going in. So he obviously is like, yeah, I want that in. I want that in. That scene where a French guy comes up and asks me for an autograph and my handler has to step in to say, no, you're not getting an autograph now. I want that in my documentary. I want to address the fact that Scottie Pippen was being really selfish when he was going for his pay rise and delayed his surgery in 1997. I want that in my documentary. And I think that speaks volumes about Michael Jordan. That is the thing that we learned about Michael Jordan, that even at this remove, 22 years later, he still wants to be the alpha dog.
I think, so you're obviously very mad into your NBA, so you probably know all of the various tectonic plates of the GM being a slightly weird individual, this being Phil Jackson, the end of the Phil Jackson era, and us all knowing that Phil Jackson goes on to have an equally brilliant career with Kobe Bryant, where he repeats the trick that he had with the Bulls, with the Lakers, which suggests that he is absolutely one of the greatest sports coaches of all time, and not just somebody who was coattailing it with Michael Jordan, whereas the GM clearly was. And that kind of those rounds, I didn't know enough about. I knew none of that stuff. So you see Jordan, the GM. There's the line in it. Jerry Krause grew up a fat, ugly kid who was bullied all the time and wanted credit for what was happening here. He was a two-time GM of the year, and in fairness, he did trade up and get Scottie Pippen, who was the perfect foil for Michael Jordan. He did manage to steal Scottie Pippen from somebody else, and so he probably deserved a little bit of the credit, but not as much as he was essentially breaking up the team, breaking up the band, not paying Scottie Pippen enough. Jordan constantly, and bear in mind, this is the most famous athlete on the planet, constantly undercutting him. You're going to practice the layups today? We're going to have to lower the ring for you.
But it's such a dick move by Michael Jordan.
And it's not once. It's not once. No. It's constant. It's throughout the film. And these are just the bits that they've shown us. So maybe he only did it twice. And in the 10,000 hours of footage, they found the two times that he was an absolute dick to this guy. But that's unlikely. There's another press conference where he's asked, what's your biggest challenge this year? And he looks up to the GM's office. And everybody kind of understands exactly what he means. I didn't know any of that stuff.
And Jordan holds a grudge. 2009, when he's getting, I'm not sure they're going to show this in later episodes, when he's getting inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2009, his only mention of Jerry Krause is, why the hell is he here? I sure as hell didn't invite him. He holds that grudge 11 years later. Krause is obviously, he passed away a couple of years ago. He's not in this documentary to defend himself. There is old footage of him actually in interviews with ESPN, I think it is, talking about some of the decision-making process. And you do feel for him. He is the biggest loser from the first few episodes of this, no question. He gets eviscerated, but you feel sorry for him because, as you said, Michael Jordan bullies him, Scottie Pippen bullies him. We are going to see the worst act of all, which is probably Phil Jackson getting pushed out of the Bulls as a result of Jerry Krause's behaviour. And that is the most egregious thing that he did with the franchise. He just completely got ahead of himself in terms of revamping this. He as you say, he wanted to credit, a bit of small man syndrome perhaps, wanted to change things around in the franchise a little bit too soon, and that's going to be the next big thread for him. If he got destroyed in the first two episodes, just wait until the Jackson storyline comes down the line, because we've barely seen Phil Jackson so far in this. He's been a talking head, but his story is yet to come, and it's Dennis Rodman actually next week that they're going to focus on, which is going to be very, very interesting.
Well, we know that Jackson has told us that Krause has told him that this is his last season. This is despite the fact that he has delivered at this stage 5 titles for the Bulls as the head coach, arriving at a time when they were completely moribund. Now, obviously, Jordan arrives at the same time, but look, we'll get into that. Look, I think it's good. I think it's very good. I didn't know a lot of this stuff, and I hadn't grown up watching NBA. I hadn't watched Michael Jordan fly through the air the way Michael Jordan flies through the air in this. And when you see him fly through the air, you're like, oh, I get it now. I understand exactly why a talent like this completely changes the context of a sport and becomes such an icon. Like, his ability to hang in the air is unbelievable. It makes no sense. And there's brilliant footage of a bunch of people in the league when he's arriving going, well, I mean, he's what, 6'6", 6'7". He's not 7 foot. Like, he's not gonna carry a team on his own. He's not gonna take this league over. He's too small. You know, a lot of very big men saying this with giant heads looking down the camera, kind of at the cameraman looking up to them, and they're all wrong. He did completely.
Can I just ask you actually about the comparisons with OJ Made in America, because it's a fair comparison to make. The producers have actually pointed out seeing OJ, I think it was at Sundance, and they were saying to themselves, right, okay, there's a documentary that's been made over multiple hours. We've got this gold mine of Jordan content. Maybe this is how we pitch it to Jordan, that it is this month-long event, and that's exactly what happened. So to make a comparison with OJ is totally fair, because OJ was an inspiration for this documentary, the OJ doc, I should say. What's your comparison between the two of those things? Because I had a kind of a similar feeling watching OJ, was that I actually don't know a lot of what's going on here, or I'd never kind of associated myself with a lot of the information before, but I know it's all out there. It's all kind of societal things. It's just really well presented. How does that differ, in terms of actual journalism and new information that have been gleaned?
Well, I think if you consider back the first couple of episodes of OJ, it's about the history of Black Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And maybe that comes later. Maybe the social history comes a little bit later. But it's kind of, it's a bit chalk and cheese. It's like Ulysses is the story of a single day, and it's this great novel that everybody talks about. There are the Dickens novels that are like, multi-serial, 700 pages of tiny text that are just completely different books, and you're like, oh, these are both novels, they're exactly the same thing, but actually they're not. So I think it's a bit chalk and cheese, because OJ is the story of race in America, and this is the story of the first billionaire athletes. And I think that's the micro focus on Jordan is what is actually the hook to suck you in. Like, either that's going to carry it or it's not. And I can't say if it's going to be successful yet, because there's another 8 episodes to go. So,
but the strength of it might be found in how they deal with the Republicans buy sneakers too comments. Like, how deep they go into that. Will they get something new on that? Perhaps not. I think every time he's been asked about that in the past, he's brushed it off as a misquote. And even the journalist, who I should say he does work for the Chicago Bulls franchise at the moment, even the journalist at the time has kind of wrote back on the actual comment, which is a little bit disappointing. But if they get something new on that, or if they get a new view from Michael Jordan himself on that, then it'll be a huge success.
Yeah, well, yeah, or maybe Michael Jordan's just an athlete, like, and maybe he's not a leader of anything other than making money and being the best basketball player of all time, and like, that's just his story. People will be disappointed, other people will be delighted, but so if the story is just his story, like, then that's fine. With OJ, I think, because it was such a product of the time, and the racial currents that was explained in so easily digestible fashion, where you could trace these moments and go, well, that's a hinge point, that's another hinge point, that's another hinge point, this leads to the riots, and that ends up with this character of OJ being a caricature that the white media is delighted to have front and centre, and go, oh no, look, we're grand, we've got OJ. And then
there was, artistically, you have to say they seem quite similar. Of course, it's very different subject matter. You're watching kind of like a montage of riots, as you say, in the OJ documentary, and you got Kool and the Gang as the music, whereas here you're watching Michael Jordan score 63 points against the Boston Celtics with LL Cool J as the soundtrack. But it just kind of felt the same watching it, even though the subject matter is entirely different, and one focuses on society, one focuses on sport. But at the same time, when you're like, there's nothing I could do to help myself thinking, God, this kind of feels as special as that last multi-part series that ESPN went big on.
Well, that's what they want. That's absolutely what they want. So we've got a good hour of analysis coming with Jarlath game with Kieran, Donaghy and Ronan Mullen coming your way from 9 o'clock. So we'll get into that a little bit later on. If you have any thoughts on that or you want us to talk about anything else, then feel free to get in touch. Use the hashtag OTB AM. What are we at? 14 minutes past 8 here on Tuesday, the 21st of April. Arsenal say the 12.5% pay cuts its staff are taking are based on the presumption the current season will be completed. Mikel Arteta, all first-team staff and his backroom team have voluntarily agreed to the cuts. The club say they'll repay agreed amounts if they meet certain targets in the seasons ahead on the pitch. Some prominent German politicians are open to the Bundesliga resuming next month. Football in the country is suspended until the 30th of April. The federal government have outlawed mass gatherings until August 31st, but the prime ministers of two regions say games can resume behind closed doors, provided league officials can prove their safety measures are watertight. So it's your job to make sure that your safety measures are fine, not ours. So anyway, in rugby, an unexpected dispensing error led to Munster prop James Cronin failing a drugs test. The 29-year-old tested positive for 2 banned substances after November's Heineken European Champions Cup game away to Racing. Cronin has been banned for 1 month until the 16th of May. He says the episode has taught him a valuable lesson. Obviously, he won't miss a single game. Leinster head coach Leo Cullen says the province won't be signing any players in the summer. Cullen said the province will have a challenging few months with the current season still to be completed, when some players will be out of contract. Rob Kearney and Joe Tamani are among those whose deals expire on the 30th of June. The coach also admitted the province will be open to playing games behind closed doors if they were asked. And in show jumping, for the very first time since the Second World War, the Dublin Horse Show has been cancelled. Organisers say the scale of the July event meant that they had to make the call early. Around 100,000 patrons were due through the gates of the RDS for the 5-day event. Discussions are already underway about the staging of next year's horse show. Here's what's coming up for you on the show this morning. We've got sports pages next. We've got top 5 stories that we're covering for you. More Treasa Ní Cheallaigh is going to join us at around about 8:35 this morning. And Off the Bull is the name of the 5-week podcast series. Is this, I mean, what, really?
It's a Ronan Mullen special.
Right.
He's got a good knack for the puns. We all agreed, and there are at least 4 people in the world who agree that Off the Bull is a good name for a podcast.
And Kieran, Donaghy and Jarlath are going to talk about The Last Dance. That's coming your way from 9 o'clock this morning. Use the hashtag OTBAM. Time for the papers.
OTB AM.
So offtheball.com is our first point. It was a revelation. This is David Coulthard speaking last night to Joe. I'll take to the grave, talking about confronting death very early on in his career with Williams. He ends up crashing, and it's before they have all the safety gear that they have, so there was no head and neck support, and there was also no tyres in front of the barrier, so he drew some conclusions from that. In rugby, we didn't see enough of that back line. That was Ronan O'Gara and Brian O'Driscoll talking about the All Blacks win. That was the classic game club we played a bit for you this morning. James Cronin banned for 1 month for unintentional doping violation. And then some more stuff there. We've got a big thing coming on Friday. Former Friday, we're asking you to dress up. And if you dress up, take a picture and donate to Frontline Heroes. The GoFundMe is offtheball.com/donate. Nicky Rackard. Turns out there's a lot of appetite for people learning about historical figures in hurling. We should talk about this James Cronin situation. So Cronin tested positive after the Racing game, and the subsequent tribunal found that Cronin went to his pharmacy, was dispensed drugs for another James Cronin, took those drugs and subsequently tested positive. The drugs that he was dispensed were prednisone, was essentially the tablet, and that has a couple of constituent parts which showed up in the sample. He was supposed to get amoxicillin, so he was supposed to get fairly run-of-the-mill antibiotic because he was feeling sick, and took 5 tablets and 4 tablets as was described on the sheets, on the bit of paper that comes with the drugs, whatever the hell that's called, the script, and subsequently obviously tested positive, got popped for that in a random drug test. The EPRC's hearing committee have accepted this, and this will now go to WADA for which I think is effectively a rubber stamping, but I'm not sure. So what does prednisone do? Why is prednisone something that people are familiar with, Owen?
Well, people are very familiar with it because it's the substance that Chris Froome would have got his TUE for. So he got his TUE for prednisolone. And just kind of reading back on the explanation at the time, obviously used to treat a variety of inflammatory and autoimmune conditions. So this is the TUE that he got for the Dauphiné in 2013, and then he got it for the Tour of Romandie as well in 2014. So, like, this got worldwide coverage around Chris Froome for two reasons. First of all, that he was using prednisolone, but second of all, because he was using a TUE for this. So there was a deliberate sense to getting prednisolone into his body, and there was certainly a grey area there about the morality of what Chris Froome were doing, and that kind of speaks to a lot of what Team Sky are doing. This is different. This is not a TUE, which is the first thing to point out, but you still need to look at the benefits of prednisolone and just kind of looking up, like, it does increase performance during submaximal exercise, and it will give you a benefit. So there's no question about this. There needed to be a ban served here, and it's just a very strange set of circumstances here and a strange set of events that somebody gets prescribed antibiotics and accidentally doesn't get antibiotics. It is a huge mess up by somebody somewhere here. You immediately look at the pharmacist here, but there has to be a duty of responsibility on almost everybody involved, doesn't there? Like, when you get prescribed antibiotics as an athlete in any field, you have to be unbelievably careful about that sort of stuff. Like, to accidentally then get something that is on the banned list, like, it's extraordinary, really. Like, this stuff needs to be double and triple checked. Like, and you look at the dosages. If you look at the full review that's come out over the last couple of days, he takes 5 tablets at a go in one day, 4 tablets in one go the next day. These are big doses that, if there is any question mark whatsoever, especially if you don't know what prednisol means on the front of the box, there should have been a call to the doctor, you would have thought, an extra call to the doctor, an extra call. And like the pharma, like, you look at the defence in the full review as well, you've got the doctor's prescriptions, you've got the pharmacy's medication dispensing form, you've got the product labels, and you've got footage of Cronin in the pharmacy at the time as well. So his story stacks up, but it doesn't mean that there can't be huge questions about this, and how on earth somebody goes in for antibiotics, an athlete goes in for antibiotics and comes out with performance-enhancing drugs.
I mean, if you're just playing devil's advocate here on both sides of it, one, if you take the story at face value, it's it's unfortunate that there's another James Cronin in the area who obviously uses the same pharmacy, and that's seemingly where the issue arose. If you're to play devil's advocate and kind of just to tease it out, if you were trying to give one of your players a substance like prednisone, you would just get a TUE for it, though, right? That's if I was defending here, I'd be like, we could have just got a TUE for this. We didn't get a TUE for it. Like, there's loads of instances where we could say somebody needs this. We didn't do that. This isn't us trying to cheat. This is us, like, accidentally giving this guy something that he shouldn't have had. That's how I would defend it. Because, like, so I guess now let's take Munster out of it totally, because just for a second, if I wanted to take prednisol as a rugby player, is it easy enough for me to get a TUE for it?
I don't know. Is it like?
I mean, it is. It effectively, I need a doctor to prescribe me one, and I need to apply for it and say I had this condition. I would like to see all the TUEs. This gets us to the kind of the core issue. What are all the other TUEs that are out there? And again, we're not saying James Cronin had any TUE, but he didn't have one for this. So a TUE would have been totally fine. This wouldn't have been an issue. They would have tested. They would have seen that he had it in the system, and away you go. Obviously, they didn't, because they hadn't prescribed it to him, and he didn't need it. So it doesn't exist here. But it certainly does bring us back down to the medicalisation of sport and rugby, and also the bit where athletes need to be responsible for what they do themselves, where the point you made.
100%.
I've got a prescription here, and the dosages are a bit different. So, like, most of us, when we get antibiotics, it's maybe you take the first one as soon as you get it, and then you take it at regular intervals afterwards. That's how I have administered amoxicillin to my kids, and that's how I've ever taken amoxicillin in the past. Maybe it's only when you have kids you start to get familiar with the names of these. So all of our kids would have had prednisone fairly regularly. It helps with chest infections that they get, which kind of happen every winter. So every winter they're always on it. It's a pain in the hole. You have to make it dissolve and then ram it into them some way. When they're absolutely tiny, you're kind of wrestling them like a steer. And so you do become familiar with the kids' ones are pink. I don't know why, but the grown-up ones aren't. I was just Googling them there. So you do become fairly familiar with the difference between these things. Maybe you don't become familiar with them when you're an athlete, but you should, right? Because your body is your job, and you definitely have to have some responsibility for that.
I think if you're putting 5 tablets into your body in one go, there has to be a huge level of scrutiny about what exactly this thing is. You look at the high end of what the ban is here. James Cronin is getting the very bottom level of the ban here. It's just a month in comparison to what could have been, I think, a 4-year ban if there was actual, if they found that the action was deliberate. They found that it's not. But still, even if it is accidental, even though it is accidental, the whole process of him winding up with these tablets, I just think that if you're putting 5 tablets into your body at any one stage and then another 4 in one go the next day, there just needs to be a bit more scrutiny there, and there is 100% a burden of responsibility on the player and definitely on the team doctor as well. The pharmacy, it may seem like I'm giving the pharmacy an easy go here, but actually they're going to get the roughest rap here, you would assume. Maybe, I don't know what happens with their relationship with the pharmacy or whatever, but I don't know who it is, but there's enough blame to go around here. It doesn't while they're going to investigate this, there is going to be another step on this, but you would assume it's case closed. They have taken the information, and it seems that the authorities are happy enough with, as I said, the kind of 4-step defence, which was the prescription, the dispensing form, the product labels, and then of course proof that Cronin was in the pharmacy at that time and he didn't get the medication from elsewhere. So they're happy enough at that level, but God, I don't know. It's not an amazing story to be quite honest.
No, it's not great. But again, if I was defending, I would be saying, look, it's stupidity, not checking. But if we wanted to take this drug and we wanted this player to be on this thing, then we would have just got a TUE for it, because we're not stupid. We understand what the rules are. We know exactly what substances you are allowed to have and what you're not allowed to have. Of all of the teams in World Rugby, we are absolutely on high alert to make sure that none of our guys are doing anything that's untoward, and so they should be. But so I maybe completely naively definitely in the camp that is I accept that this process here that you have described can happen, but that doesn't mean that there's not some more. You need to have a heightened sense of personal responsibility when it comes, particularly when you're an athlete. What's the endo?
The Indo this morning is leading with that James Cronin story as well, that WADA are going to review the Cronin ban. So just to tell you what's happening here, WADA will assess the full written judgment of Munster prop James Cronin's 1-month ban for what has been described as an unintentional anti-doping violation. This is just part of WADA's standard procedure. His case will be reviewed in full, and it will be decided if a 1-month ban will be deemed to be a sufficient punishment. So WADA essentially get final say on this. The other story here in the back of the Irish Independent this morning is that the GEA are seeking clarification on Harris' views of mass scatterings. The GEA expected to seek more information. We were kind of speaking to Alan Milton about this yesterday, seeking more information from the Department of Health and Minister Simon Harris before bringing closure to a 2020 Inter-County Championship season.
The Irish Times, their front page there is Cullen proud of Leinster's medical staff on the front line. Irish trainers looking at June 1st return to action. So the body representing racehorse trainers are looking at June 1st as a potential date for racing to resume behind closed doors in Ireland. So that would be great if it was safe to do so. Carney deserving of some kind of send-off. This is obviously that story that we were talking about there in the news bulletin, that Carney's contract will run out at the end of June, and how well Rob Carney has played for Leinster, basically their most decorated, most successful player ever up to this point, and how he absolutely deserves a good send-off. Cronin accepts ban for anti-doping infringement. Gavin Cummickey's piece includes the lines from the, where's the full title of it? Anthony Davis, the independent judicial officer appointed by the EPCR, said that Cronin could have done more to avoid the violation. Players cannot rely blindly on the advice of their team doctors, and the player ought to have at least stopped to consider why he was given 2 sets of medication instead of 1. So that was the story there. And Liam O'Neill has done an interview with Sean Moran too. So that is the Irish Times for you this morning.
The Irish Examiner leads with the story from Munster yesterday. Cronin hit with 1-month ban after pharmacy dispensing error. Leo Cullen, it's important we are open-minded to the best solution, and Twickenham used as a test centre for coronavirus is the latest from the UK. Also, actually, it's interesting that David Fitzgerald has been out saying closed-door championship better than none at all. Like, this could be the next level of the debate here about whether or not a closed-door championship is something that the players and management want, but David Fitzgerald is up for it.
Yeah, I think he's got a very good point. I think that better than nothing at all. Like, so let's imagine a world where there are no games, but it is actually safe to have small gatherings, and championship teams could be restricted to a certain amount of backroom staff. So you don't have the full. Like, are we definitely saying that there would be some competitive issues that wouldn't be resolved, so the big teams with the big backroom teams wouldn't be able to get the advantage that they have? We would be automatically limiting that. Like, it sounds like a good way forward, to be honest. Anyway, that if you were to put a cap on spending, or a cap on backroom team, or a cap on value created or hours spent in the backroom teams, you know, maybe we might be accidentally getting to a point where it's like back to, you know, a lower level of people in the back rooms. Is this the worst thing that might have happened?
Possibly not. I would assume that like there could still be backroom teams used on a consultancy basis. That great phrase. And teams could check in and out via Zoom with their consultants. Maybe it's psychologists, maybe it's their dietitians, and they just don't need to be there on match day. So I'd say they'll probably find some way of circumventing the use of so many people on a match day, but they probably still will find a role. The thing is, it's just people won't be able to afford it as huge backroom teams perhaps next season or the season after, if intercounty the ability of intercounty teams to spend money will actually nosedive, which you expect might happen. That's what I think is going to be the case here, that some of there will actually be a long, hard look at how much of these backroom teams do we really need.
The Daily Mail this morning, Cronin banned, EPCR accept doping breach unintentional. Hall of Fame snub for Harrington is out of bounds and must be sorted. I didn't know this. Pádraig Harrington. Controversy about the Golf Hall of Fame, which I didn't even know was a thing, and now there's controversy about it. So we can all row in behind this, obviously. Pádraig Harrington snubbed. First year he's available for it, and he's not one of the new inductees. And then the story at the bottom there is our story from yesterday. All Ireland may have to be finished in 2021. The Director of Communications for the GA, Alan Milton, was with us yesterday morning to talk to us about some potential scenarios, and the Mail are picking up on that today.
The London Independent this morning leads with a photograph there of Magnus Carlsen pioneering a new online chess event. The one sport, chess and darts, we can live on a diet of them for the foreseeable future. Arsenal squad and staff agree 12.5% pay cut, writes Tom Kershaw, and Novak Djokovic has said that his opposition to vaccines may prevent him from returning to tennis after the coronavirus pandemic. He has revealed himself to be an anti-vaxxer over the last couple of days.
So I've got the Daily Mail next. Did I have I just did the Daily Mail, didn't I? Yeah, sorry, I skipped one there. So I was supposed to do the Herald before that. So I can go on and do the UK Times next. So the UK Times, there you go. British plan to fill void left by Wimbledon. British tennis players could return to action this summer on home soil in a closed-doors tournament limited to 8 singles competitors and a handful of doubles teams. We'll all be watching every single serve and double fault and mediocre tennis that the mid-ranking English players can serve up for us. And there's Sun Heung-min, the Spurs forward, beginning military service in South Korea. A 3-week camp set to include an 18-mile march and live firing drills. So basically shooting guns and having the crack on quarantine for 3 weeks for Sun Heung-min and getting his military service out of the way and it not causing an issue for Spurs. So win-win-win-win-win for them. And spike in player depression. Every professional footballer in England has been sent a mental health survey after a number of players reporting symptoms of depression doubled in the wake of lockdown measures. And ball polishing. Ban saliva in ball polishing, Owen. How do you polish your balls? Do you use saliva?
No, they're already very well polished, so absolutely no need for that sort of thing. Back page of the Mirror this morning is 350k a week, but Ozil's snub is 12.5% pay cut. Highest paid star is one of the first team players to reject club plea as he waits to see full financial impact of coronavirus. 20 million thank yous for Rashford. Meanwhile, Marcus Rashford has revealed his pride at raising 20 million quid to help feed school children during the coronavirus pandemic. And now Deeney's annoyed with pay cut. Troy Deeney, the latest Premier League footballer to express football's anger with British Health Secretary Matt Hancock. And could GAA club action return? Fendley sees 9,533 reasons against it, pointing to the attendance issues that will come with a full return to normality down the line.
Yeah, so we're not going to have games the way we had until there's a vaccine, and until everybody gets it, or until antibody tests show that we all already had it. Anyway, so we should stop planning for those or stop hoping for that and plan for something different. The Herald, hard to stay apart in the field of play. This is threat to matches at all levels. GAA seeking clarification from Minister Simon Harris. And Shanghai back training. This is a Donaghy Boyle story. That Shanghai GAA club are the envy of every GAA club in the world because they're back training, and that sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
It's not bad. I'd say most athletes will be looking at them in envy. One of them may be Mesut Ozil, and he's on the back of the Irish Daily Star. Nozil is the headline. Mesut refuses to join Gunners in taking a pay cut. So he's one of 3 players who have refused to take their 12.5% pay cut. He's up for a pay deferral, but not for a cut. The Star have also been speaking to Curtis Fleming. I only had 4 hours to get out of India. He says, you've got some nostalgia as well. 40 years ago this week, after the FAI Cup final between Limerick and Waterford United. It's Brian Gardner who's been in conversation with the Irish Daily Star, or he's photographed there at least. Irish fans to trip out. The Green Army will almost certainly be banned from Ireland's Euro 2020 playoff with Slovakia in Bratislava next autumn, and GAA may play into New Year. That's from Alan Milton's comments.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to play Slovakia in the autumn?
Could be behind closed doors. Yeah, I think that there's a possibility it could be behind closed doors. I think anybody who's got a notion of hopping on a plane and watching Ireland play football this year in Slovakia, I don't think that's going to happen.
Okay, so that was the Star. The Telegraph, which I have... talk among yourself there. Oh, here we go. Telegraph back page is Arsenal risk unrest in split over pay cut. It's funny how Arsenal are the only ones who managed to screw this up to the point where we're reading about it every day. Like, what's going on at Spurs, what's going on at Chelsea, what's going on at Man United, what's going on at Liverpool. But no, it's Arsenal who are the focus of it. So again, you just wonder about how well run behind the scenes that club is. Football warned of major obstacles to resuming season. Politicians and player representatives last night warned of the major obstacles that still exist before sport, and especially football, can resume. Nicola Sturgeon suggested that a coronavirus vaccine might be required before stadiums were fully reopened to fans, while FIFPro, the World Players Union, warned that players should not be pressurised to return before they felt safe. So, I mean, that's all obvious stuff, right? We kind of knew that this was going to be an issue.
I've got the Guardian this morning. The lead story here is an interesting one. An interesting hypothesis. Advisor aware of possible virus link to Liverpool versus Atletico. This is obviously a game that went ahead on, was it Wednesday the 11th of March, and you had a lot of people flying over from Madrid, despite the fact that Madrid was already in a state of semi-lockdown at the time. So a couple of these sporting events being pointed out as some of the moments that really kick-started coronavirus in the UK, and came out of United's price range as virus affects budget, writes Jamie Jackson. That there's been lots of talk over the last couple of days, especially from Wayne Rooney in his column at the weekend, that Manchester United should be rebuilding around Harry Kane, but they probably can't afford him if this article is to be believed, because everybody's going to struggle to actually fork out cash. £150 million is what you might need to pay for Harry Kane, because he's under contract until 2024. Are you paying 150 million quid in this climate? Probably not. You might pay over 100 million quid for someone like Jadon Sancho with a huge amount of potential still to come. Harry Kane's still a young man, obviously, but I'm not sure is he worth 150 million quid.
No, I don't know if it will be very interesting to see how well football recovers, or how quickly football recovers, especially once the TV deals, if they don't finish out and they have to give money back, then all of a sudden, because there will be clauses in all the sponsorship deals as well. So I think that the oil price crash in the last 24 hours is going to be very interesting to see if that persists and if that's a real thing for the next couple of weeks as opposed to something technical thing. Then I don't see anybody spending 100 million on any footballer at any point in the next couple of years. So there's a bit of fantasy football going on in this. Last one for now is the Irish News. And the Irish News cover back page is Murray, we're overwhelmed by support after daughter's op. Antrim Ace now craving normality in family life and sport. And Milton, challenges ahead as GAA summer looks doomed. So Alan Milton's interview with us here this morning is on many of the back pages today, as the whole hope that we have some games in the summer is beginning to look a little bit unlikely. Just a reminder, obviously, Jarlath Regan's going to join us after 9 o'clock to talk about The Last Dance. He's got a new podcast called Inside Basketball, an Irishman Abroad, part of his podcast network. You can check that out wherever you get your podcasts now. This Friday on Off the Ball, we want you to join us in supporting those in the front line by dressing up for Formal Friday. That's right, it's time to get up and get dressed. No more shorts all day. We want to see you running your 5K in your tuxedo. How many keepy uppies can you do in your wedding suit? That's wedding suit, not birthday suit on. Or maybe you can just work from home in your wedding dress. Post it on social media with the hashtag Formal Friday and then get on to offtheball.com/donate to help raise funds for our frontline heroes. We're all going to be getting involved here in Off the Ball. It's for a great cause, so get on to offtheball.com/donate for more info. What are you wearing on?
Wearing a shirt at the moment. I will be putting on what did he say, tuxedo? I do have a suit.
I didn't mean now, Owen. That would be disgusting.
Yeah, that was a joke. I am going to put on a suit, yes, absolutely. Of course. Formal Friday, what else?
Okay, let's move on. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Treasa Ní Cheallaigh, a colleague of ours here in OTB who's been studying medicine in the RCSI, the Royal College of Surgeons, just over the road from us. And over the last few weeks has been volunteering on the front line after she was asked to volunteer and help patients with COVID-19. MT, how are you?
I'm good. Also, not in my birthday suit, fully dressed. I just feel the need to get that out there, including
for our radio listeners. It's okay. Everybody watching can tell. Are you in scrubs? Are you?
No, not in scrubs right now. But I do have to say, whenever I do go in, there is a section obviously where you go in, you get into the room, you find the scrubs you're going to wear for the day, and obviously they're laid out by size and stuff. And like they're usually there in blue, sometimes red. But there's always like a small set of maroon ones, and I'd like to feel that they leave them out especially for me. I always wear the maroon scrubs if I can at all.
What has this been like, and how, so for anybody who's unfamiliar, what stage of your medical career are you at the moment, and how do you end up getting involved?
I call myself 50% doctor, so I'm halfway through the degree. It's a 4-year graduate entry degree, so normally medicine would take a bit longer than that. I sat an exam about 2 years ago to try and get into the fast-paced stream, so to speak. Somehow got in. I don't know how. I collected potato packets or something, whatever, but I'm in there anyway. So I have 2 years done. And with every year that goes by, they get a little bit more clinical, a little bit more practical. So in first year, I was based, like you said, in town in just across the road from OTB Towers. And then for the last year, we were based out in Connolly Hospital in the academic centre, which is great for learning because you're in the lecture theatre and then they're like, okay, let's go see this now. And you're taken up and you go across the way into the hospital where you get to meet the patient and the doctor will talk you through. So it was a really good way to learn. It meant we weren't totally green either. They kind of threw us in from the deep end from day one. We were meeting patients and that kind of thing. So I'm at that stage where I'm probably not that useful, but useful enough that I understand what they're talking about and can follow instruction, if that makes sense. So I think maybe that's why when they were looking for the extra sets of hands, they were able to ask, medicine students who had done a little bit of clinical work to ask us, would we be able to volunteer to go in and help them in ICU, if that makes sense.
So you're volunteering to help in ICU. Does that mean you're in the ICU? Does that mean you're helping the people who are going into the ICU? What on a day-to-day practical level do you end up doing?
What you do is basically you go into ICU, obviously you put on your scrubs, and then you put on the personal protective equipment, the PPE we've all heard so much about. And that's probably the most stressful part of the day. Not so much putting it on, but taking it off, obviously. They call it donning and doffing. So you're putting on the suit, so to speak, in Connolly, where you're wearing kind of white kind of hazmat suits, for the want of a better phrase to describe it for people maybe to imagine. You put that on, you're putting on 2 pairs of gloves, we're putting on the sanitized goggles, we're putting on the mask, making sure there's no air getting in or out. You're covering your head and you're just constantly sanitizing your hands and you're just making sure that you're protecting yourself and also protecting others, because obviously when you leave the hospital, you want to make sure you're not taking anything with you. So That's what we're doing. And then our job is to go in. We go in teams of 4. So me and 3 other students, and our job is we get called by somebody in ICU or critical care, usually the anaesthetist. They're the person kind of in charge of dealing with these very, very ill patients. They're intubated, and they will let us know if patients need help. What we do is called proning, and it's basically moving patients onto their stomach to help them breathe, to keep it very, very simply. The evidence is there now, apparently, with this kind of viral infection that you can take a lot of pressure off somebody's lungs by lying on their stomach. Because if you can imagine lying on your back, if you can just imagine yourself, your heart and all your internal organs are pressing down onto your lungs. So by turning yourself around, you're just creating a bit more oxygen saturation. That's the ladybird, completely non-scientific version that makes sense in my head. I'm sure there's respiratory consultants maybe listening to this going, dear God, how did she get into doctor school? But that's my understanding of it.
We've obviously seen those pictures from Italy of the patients on their front over the last while, and we at the start of this, I think everybody was fairly addicted to finding as much information as you possibly could from whatever available source. The endless scrolling kind of was a significant feature of the early part of it. For you, who has medical knowledge and is increasing your store of medical knowledge all the time, what was that early part like, and how did the whole urge to volunteer come about, and how did that happen? What was that process? What was the mix of those two things?
I won't lie, I wasn't the first person to put my hand up. I did wait a few days to see how it went out, and I think it's important to say, because I think there's this whole mythology going out right now about healthcare workers and doctors and nurses and everyone who works in hospitals and physios and all the healthcare disciplines. It did take me a while to decide, did I want to do it? It's not easy, and the first day was terrifying. But I think really, like you said, it's the fear of the unknown and the scrolling, and then also knowing that, thankfully, touch wood, even though Ireland has had suffered awful tragedies in their families that will never be the same after this, it seems to have been controlled, and that made me feel a lot better about it. And I spoke to some of my classmates, and they said, yeah, it's very well controlled. They felt safe, they felt protected. So that's kind of how I came from. And like anything, any kind of fear most of us have is due to the unknown. And then once I actually knew what was ahead of me, and then once I actually went in and worked in it, I realized that, yeah, it's very high stakes. But to be fair, every effort is being made to mitigate against anything bad happening to you or your own family, if that makes sense. But yeah, thankfully, so far, because it's been so well managed, because the Irish people have done such a good job of flattening the curve, there's been no chaos. Not that I've seen anyway. It's all been very organised. Everybody knows what their role is. There's plenty of staff, there's plenty of doctors, there's plenty of nurses. Everybody is looked after to the best of their ability, if that makes sense.
It must be pretty exhausting.
It can be. The heat, and this is where I say again, there is obviously, we come in and we come out and we're called on duty and we're stood down off duty. Compare that to doctors and nurses who are in there for hours in that personal protective equipment. The heat just saps the energy out of you. If you can imagine, you're breathing in. If you can imagine a mask on your mouth, there's no air coming in, there's no air coming out. Those clothes are warm. Hospitals by nature are warm. You're in a high state of kind of adrenaline. I am anyway. I'm kind of standing like this, ready to go. And then you're doing very physical labor. And then you're coming out and you're doing that a few times a day, depending on how long the shift is or how many shifts you volunteered for that week. And then you come out and there's a bit of mental exhaustion. And I think that's probably something that healthcare workers are going to have to be careful about in the weeks and months ahead, that there's a lot of mental processing that probably isn't being done right now, if that makes sense. And people will have to take time, take stock, process what they've seen, process what they've gone through, be that either patients who've gone through it, relatives of patients who've gone through it, and people who've actually worked in a healthcare setting as well. Like, once eventually COVID-19 goes away, the scars will still be here. And I think that's something we need to be careful about when it comes to mental scars. When it also comes to, we've heard the anecdotes now of people not going to hospital because they're afraid maybe of being a burden to healthcare, or maybe afraid of catching it. And then so many elective operations and procedures and appointments have been kind of just kicked the can down the road. If that's not dealt with, we're going to deal with another kind of post-COVID crisis that could be, maybe the figures mightn't be as obvious, but people are still could still get very, very seriously ill because of it. And we just need to be very, very careful about that. And that's why I was telling people, we see the curve flattening now, and that's exhausting too. Like, there's nothing more exhausting I can imagine than being at home with 2 or 3 kids and trying to keep them indoors and trying to keep everyone safe. So we're all feeling a bit itchy feet now, but this is the long haul. Even eventually, once people get let out, there's going to be repercussions, ramifications, at least for the next 2 years, I think.
Treasa, what's your view on how this is going to change society and how we behave and interact with one another down the line?
Ooh, that's a big philosophical question on. I'd like to think it will change things for the better. I would like to think that employers will. Now, lots of employers do. Let's not paint them all with the same brush here. But I'd like to think that those who perhaps showed less trust in their employees before to be working might suddenly realise, actually, Joe or Mary is getting on very well at home. I'm going to let them work from home a day or two a week. Just that would, can you imagine what that can do for quality of life when not everyone is constantly stressed about being out in the M50, trying to get into town, driving around cities and towns of Ireland. We've all seen the gridlock around towns like that. I think that would make a big difference for people's physical and mental health, because all of a sudden, if you're not commuting 2-3 hours a day, can you imagine that time you now have back? You can spend that with your family, you can spend it on a hobby, you can go outdoors. I really hope that might be the big change, that people might start prioritising lifestyle, kind of working to live, not living to work, if that makes sense. I really hope that'll be the big thing. And I really hope as well that we don't suffer from short memories, that we remember, it's only last year nurses were out striking looking for extra money. The work they do is amazing. They are saints. I don't know how they do it. That we appreciate healthcare workers, that we appreciate the money they earn that they don't earn, that when we crib about consultants earning six figures, yeah, but that woman or man has been training for 17, 18 years, and they've worked really long hours, unsociable hours. They've sacrificed a lot of personal time to get to that point. That we tend to have a better, more holistic picture of what people do to contribute to society, and that we're just a bit nicer to each other. I know this probably sounds a bit Rose of Tralee, but if there's one thing I've noticed over the last few weeks, it's that people seem to be nicer. Like, I am a country girl. Like, if I walk around in Yarrow at home, I'm saying hello to people as I walk past. That never happens in Dublin. It's happening now, so I kind of hope that stays. I'm looking at my apartment block here. I never knew, and I knew one woman in the block. I now know a lot more, and I see two elderly residents here every day when the sun shines. They go down and they have tea down where the sun trap is, and they do their social distancing, but they're having the chats, and they never knew each other before this. So hopefully, that's what I kind of hope, that we just value being the human experience. And I know, geez, that sounds very deep for this hour of the morning, but I just hope that we don't forget that, and that we don't go back to the rat race.
Yeah. I mean, I hope you're right. I really hope you're right, because we're still, and look, we're as guilty of it in this show as everybody else, talking about like what's the way back? How do we get back to? And the question has to be, what are we going back to, as opposed to how do we get back to normal? How do we get back to 80,000 on All Ireland final day? How do we get back to the Aviva being full for the Six Nations? Like it's a long way away before any of that actually happens. And who knows? Like we haven't even really got our heads around the possibility that there might be another strain, that if this happens once, the likelihood of it happening again is now more likely to happen again than less likely, given that this strain can mutate and the vaccine takes a while to catch up, and it's like, actually, this is going to put our health system under the exact same strain that it would have done in the past. So how we live with whatever is coming next is going to be the challenge for everybody and all of the countries of the world. And there's going to be big differences between approaches. Like, you can already begin to see that fissure with Trump defunding the World Health Organization. So, I mean, it's fairly scary times.
Yeah, it is. And I think maybe, funnily enough, again, you see different countries reacting differently. You have a big section of the United States who've decided, science means nothing. I want to open up my economy and that's it. And we all know how Trump defunded the little pandemic unit they used to have to keep an eye on viruses, stuff like this. So that already meant the world was on the back foot. We saw the UK reaction, and we saw how Boris Johnson paid very dearly for his reaction. And then we have here yet in Ireland, thanks be to whoever you believe in, that people still give kind of weight to what the CMO says, what public health says. And that's the big worry, because we're seeing countries like ours, and we're not perfect by any means, but I think we're doing our best. And we're seeing other countries worldwide doing their best to try and overcome this, to move on. But then how can we actually move on when you see other countries actually just turn their back on best medical advice? And that'd be the big worry. So what are we going to do if we've created a nice little island here where we do know, where we have contact tracing, that we all know if somebody gets COVID-19, we can do the contact tracing. We know how to keep them, subsided for 14 days, so we can kind of get back to normal in a smaller kind of way. Are we going to stop flights in from America? Are we going to stop flights from the UK? Is Northern Ireland, is it going to follow our rules? And this is where we're going to have the conundrums and the questions. And even when the vaccine arrives, we saw yesterday Novak Djokovic saying that he wouldn't be that keen on taking it. And this is the world now that anti-vaxxers have wanted. And yet you still cannot talk to them to explain this is why vaccines are a good thing. And actually, I remember before Christmas, I was in a lecture. It was about the flu. And the amount of people that don't take the flu jab every year, despite the fact that we know it kills you. And I remember the lecturer saying that we were due a pandemic, that had been time that one would come around the corner very, very soon. And that we were very lucky with SARS. But SARS about 15 years ago at this point, it didn't really reach here. They had MERS in the Middle East that didn't reach. We had the swine flu, and we always skirted. Did Owen get swine flu?
He did on the day that Kerry won All Ireland as well.
Oh dear.
If there's any sort of indication that we should not be going back to 82,000 people in a stadium, it is that very piece of evidence.
You think so? You were fine going to the final, was coming home that you got sick?
No, it was actually, I remember it was after a fry up on the way up that I started to get sick. So somewhere in the Midlands, but yeah, you're
so
right.
You were the super spreader. You went to Croke Park and you spread the swine flu.
Yeah, it was worth it though. Kerry won the All Ireland. That's all that matters. That's a joke. That's not a very sensible thing to say right now. It's a good point though. They did feel, because like when you think about, say, common practice over the last couple of months, you know, like coughing into your elbow, like washing your hands properly, all that sort of stuff, like that has been rolled out previously in Ireland. And with the bird flu, with the swine flu, that you're right, that they were actually near misses. And perhaps at the start, we all kind of thought it would actually just reach that level and it wouldn't get much worse, until we realised we were all very, very wrong.
But I was one of those people too. I remember in January and February telling people, it'll be grand, don't worry. Sure, most people don't even know they have it. And unfortunately, even I didn't. And I was in, like, the big thing that we study in second year in graduate entry medicine is microbiology. And even I, despite being told this morning, noon and night by lecturers, was going, sure, it'll be grand. It'll only be like a mild flu, a mild cold for most of us. And unfortunately, that is the way. But the difference, I think, between this one and SARS was that it was very easy to tell if you had SARS. You know, you were symptomatic nearly immediately, whereas this has, as we know now, up to 14 days incubation period. And that's the problem with this one. We just don't know who has it. And we're going to be waiting for antibody testing, or we're going to be waiting at the very least. I mean, I'm no expert. I'm only listening to experts. And I feel from what I've been seeing and reading online and listening to people that maybe instead of antibody testing, what's going to happen to maybe help reopen things up and get ourselves back to normal is that we might find a good antiviral drug that if you do catch COVID-19, if it does affect you in a really adverse way, that the antiviral drug might be a cure, which that seems to be very great, because it's not going to work for everyone. And at some point, society is going to have to decide, is the trade-off worth it?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and look, that's the big philosophical questions that we're going to be grappling with for the next while. Speaking of big philosophical questions, MT, I know that you're obviously going to be very busy over the weekend saving lives, but the other thing you have to do is to decide who's going to go on the Galway Mount Rushmore. I think you've got about a week to do it, or
yes,
about a week to do it. So I know it's a really difficult thing to do, but I mean, generally, Paul Rouse had good criteria. I need to have seen the person play live, but obviously Dermot Ling put Nicky Rackard on yesterday. So you make up your own. It's your mount. It's your mountain. You get to pick. And I'm not going to ask you.
I couldn't be doing with that now, because then, like, obviously, I mean, there's people from Galway, wonderful, wonderful Galwegians who I've never seen playing, but I'd have to have them in contention. That'd be ludicrous. How could you have a Galway Mount Rushmore without discussing Joe Connolly for a start?
Okay, well, fair enough. At least you've seen Connolly on the video. So anyway.
I have, and there's a very embarrassing photo of a 15-year-old me getting an award from Joe Connolly.
Bring it in, send it in to us. That's our opening shot. MT, enjoy it, and enjoy the consideration of who deserves their place in Galway. We'll talk to you again real soon. Thanks a million. Stay safe.
Cool. Thanks, lads. Bye-bye, Slán.
It's Treasa Ní Cheallaigh there from the sideline to the front line. Right, Michael Astor's going to join Treasa next Monday morning at 9 o'clock to decide on the Galway Mount Rushmore. Now, over the past few weeks here on Off the Ball, we've been checking in with athletes across the country and asking, how's the head? We'd love to hear how you're getting on, what's keeping you sane, what's got you through the last few weeks. And have you any recommendations to share? Definitely people sharing recommendations has been one of the other hallmarks of this, whether or not it's how to cook, or if it's as simple as what box set is actually good, or which ones to avoid. You can WhatsApp Off the Ball on 0879 180 180, or use the hashtag how's the head. 0879 180 180, or use the hashtag how's the head. Yesterday, Will O'Callaghan caught up with Laois football captain Anna Healy. Have a look.
It's tough for everyone. It's definitely a different way of living compared to what we'd be used to, but I'm doing okay anyway. I'm trying to keep as busy as much as I can. I have a good bit of college work to keep me going, and then on top of that, I'm trying to get out and do a bit of exercise and a few other bits like that, and sure, watching a bit of TV and that kind of thing. Sure, I don't actually feel the day passing because I'm so busy. Very strange for us. We were meant to be going on placement, so I was meant to be going on placement to the Mercy Hospital in Cork, but then just the week before we went, the colleges were all closed, so that was all pulled. So technically we had all our college hours completed, so now we're just trying to do case study work and a bit of like phone calling patients and different ways, I suppose, of working with people just to try build up our placement hours and get the experience that we're missing out on, I suppose, because of the way things are at the minute. Studying physiotherapy in UL, and this is my last year, so hopefully go into the health service or maybe down the sports line. I'm not really sure, but just a lot of the placements will be based in the HSE. So just unfortunate, I suppose, the way it fell for us, that we're kind of uncertain now as to when we'll graduate or when we'll get the hours done. The main thing that I'm doing is a bit of running. Like it's hard to get enough done within the 2K radius. Well, not even that, but it gets a bit repetitive. So I'm trying to vary it up as well, doing a few gym classes and circuit training sessions at home. And I'm going to an online gym class now this evening, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, just trying to stay active whatever way I can, even if it's only bringing the dog for a walk. It's good for the mind, I suppose, as well as the body. Luckily, I have a few light weights and that kind of thing just built up over the years, like between the whole lot of us here. So I'm making do with them now. I won't be making any massive gains, I'd say, over the next few weeks, but just try to maintain as much as I can. The important thing is try to aim to, I suppose, get half an hour of exercise in every day, and that's what would be recommended by the World Health Organization, even throughout all this. And as strict and all as the guidelines are, there still is plenty of opportunity to do that whatever way you like, because I mean a 2K radius is actually quite big. As much as you might feel like you're repeating yourself, there is still plenty of opportunity to get your 30 minutes in outside the house like that. Or there are loads of things online, like loads of bloggers and fitness people on Instagram and all different forms of social media are putting out different workouts, and some of them only take 15-20 minutes, and you feel great after it. So I think it's just finding something that suits you and suits the way you're operating at the minute, and then trying to maintain your physical activity levels that way. The first blow was the O'Connor Cup being pulled, because that was the Thursday and we were meant to be playing the semi-final on the Friday. Sure, we didn't know what to do because we'd spent all our time in college since January getting ready for that, and there's such a good buzz around it and everyone's so excited. So it was a bit surreal, completely knocked the wind out of us. We didn't know what to be thinking. And then I suppose the news came in the last week or so that it was definitely cancelled and not just postponed, even though we had a fair idea. That's another sucker punch. So it's so strange. And then with the club and the county football not being going on at the minute, not even being able to train, it's just mad really. But we're trying to keep the morale up, in the different group chats, doing different challenges and posting whatever bits of exercise we're doing and saying, this might be a good idea for someone to do the next stage, just to try to keep the team spirit up as well.
It's 9:01 here this morning on Tuesday, the 21st of April. I'll have to keep looking that one up. Right, thanks very much for joining us. It's the Sports Breakfast Show here, OTB AM. We've got Jarlath, Regan, Ronan, Mullen, Kieran, Donaghy joining Eoin next to talk Michael Jordan and chat through the first two episodes of The Last Dance, which premiered on Netflix yesterday. If you've missed anything from the show this morning, don't worry, you can get it back through the OTB AM podcast. That's OTB AM. And the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, the best place for us is on the offtheball.com website or the Go Loud app. You can hit subscribe, and it's a 2-hour breakfast show for you, delivered to your earbuds every single morning, whenever you want it. Right, we're back talking Michael Jordan immediately after these.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Off the Ball 2019 IMRO Radio Awards Sports Programme of the Year.
Salah takes the shot. Oh, Mo Salah with one of the goals of the season.
Who will see their dreams turn into reality? Whose names will be etched in history forever?
Offtheball.com, best online publisher at the 2019 Spider Awards.
A big breaking story on offtheball.com for you this morning. We have the very latest on the Mayo leaks. We now know what went on in that secretive Mayo County Board meeting.
2019 Irish Sponsorship Awards Best Radio Sponsorship, OTB Super Value GAA Roadshows.
Well, when she comes back, get your arse back here, he said. Star is out sitting on the swing and Darren O'Sullivan is pushing him.
OTB Sports Radio, live online 24/7 on the Go Loud app.
This is OTB Sports Radio. OTB AM.
All right, you are very welcome along to Off the Bull. credit Ronan Mullen for that tagline. This is the show for the next 5 weeks where we're going to be watching The Last Dance, ESPN's brand new Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls documentary. Delighted to say that Ronan Mullen is with us, Kieran Donaghy is with us, and Jarlath Regan, you're welcome along to the basketball conversation. We might start with you, Jarlath. I think we're all huge fans immediately of The Last Dance so far. What do you think of last night's first 2 episodes?
Well, I was really ready to be disappointed. I was really, really ready because I've probably watched every kind of handmade version of this on YouTube. So for me, I was so pleasantly surprised to see how it's a really elegant, beautiful homage to, you know, the Babe Ruth of basketball, and that it included the laying of the groundwork for something that could sustain over 10 episodes. I mean, that's the first thought. It's like, my wife was like, oh, 10 hours of this, how are they going to manage that?
10 episodes is an incredibly long time. This is a bloody marathon when it comes to it. Even if you look back at some of the recent big undertakings from the likes of ESPN, and you think about OJ Made in America, this is on a whole other level. And you do wonder if it would have the legs, if it would have the narrative to be able to sustain it beyond the first couple of weeks. Kieran, I think it's pretty clear from the first 2 hours that this is going to be sustainable.
Oh yeah, I think I would have stayed on and watched the other 8, no doubt, which is always a good sign of a series. But look, there's so many fascinating characters in the story, and we spoke about this last week on, like, we haven't even got to Rodman, and I know he's next week, but, like, fascinating story with Jordan and Pippen, and how underpaid Pippen was, and the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with Jerry Krause and Phil Jackson, and how it was all handled. And yeah, there's a great insight. You can even see, I'm even picking up bits of the footage, the way Jordan and Pippen and them kind of acting around Jerry Krause, and you could tell that there was no positive feeling towards him at all, and it was very much I'd say Phil Jackson almost used it as us against them type mentality as well. And yeah, look, it was brilliant, and it's, it's got so many characters, and it will have by the time it finishes, but it's all based around, that, as Mike Wilbon said, that ultimate sports alpha male who is Michael Jordan. And yeah, I think we got enough of Jordan and Pippen's story where we can now start to bring in the Steve Kerrs and the Rodmans and these guys, Ron Harpers, that played a huge role in that season. But it's great to see also from guys like, who played with Jordan when he was a rookie, etc. So you're getting that insight as well to because we wouldn't have heard much about Jordan's rookie year as in such. We knew how good he was, but you wouldn't see the interaction. So yeah, no, it was really good.
Ronan, that was pretty good to look at as well. I think you were texting me beforehand saying the soundtrack is amazing. Personally, I'm just a huge lover of any ESPN montage, especially when you've got all this brilliant footage from Jordan's college days.
Oh, and you know me, I'm a sucker for a montage. Eric B and Raheem straight out the gate, so I was golden there. But I don't know about you, like, it's kind of like Stranger Things. I don't know if you watch Stranger Things, but it makes you nostalgic for a time that you weren't really cognizant of. And like, for Jordan, obviously we were around, but I definitely wasn't aware of basketball on this level. I probably knew who Michael Jordan was before I knew what basketball was. So it's kind of like Muhammad Ali aside, this is kind of the era that I wish I had been around for to kind of experience. And the circumstances being that they are somewhat bizarre, but the whole world is once again 20 years later all focused on Michael Jordan. And it seems kind of fitting because the scale of this thing, it would have been a shame if it fell under the radar in any capacity, but the way things are, I think everyone's going to be tuning in, and it's a remarkable piece of work, and I'm glad it came together because, as it was revealed, like this, there was a lot of pitching back and forth to get access for this footage for the final season because people knew it was sort of falling apart at the seams, and 20 years later, it's finally come together. So I think it's a treat for everybody.
Yeah, like imagine sitting on this gold mine for so long, 22 years of unbelievable footage. Like just reading back some of the material, like Adam Silver talking about being head of entertainment and the persuasion that had to go into allowing the Bulls to bring cameras in the first time, and then the re-persuasion that had to happen over the last couple of years to allow Michael Jordan to do this thing and to persuade him to do so. It's mad really that somewhere in ESPN this thing was sitting there for so long, and you can just imagine the producers behind this salivating at the prospect, and it is finally here. And as you say correctly, Ronan, just this ability to be right in the spotlight now. It doesn't have the NBA Finals sort of playoffs to contend with. It has nothing in the world to contend with. It is right here.
Well, unsurprisingly, so 30 for 30 were given this footage when that series first started, and they obviously were salivating at the prospect of doing something with it. And as you said, for whatever reason, Jordan just wasn't that keen. Maybe the price point didn't get to where he wanted it to go. But there have been rumours in the last few days, and it'll be a surprise to no one, given how competitive he is, that when LeBron closed out that finals in 2016, and there was a little bit of talk about, is LeBron the greatest ever, that Jordan sort of pulled the trigger on it. And Mike Tolan was on the Ringers podcast last weekend, and he basically said that he had his meeting. Jordan was sort of on the fence, and once he found out that these are the same guys who made the Iverson documentary, that was a triumph in itself, obviously a lot shorter than this one, but when they saw
Let me ask you this question, lads, though. How much of that back and forth do you think resided in him not wanting to come across like a prick? Because I imagine, especially based on some of the comments that he's made since, and what we saw, even in the not hugging Scott Burrell in Paris, that we're going to see the darkness. We're going to see the dark side of this man. And I guess I did love him as a poster. But the more I learned of the man, the more I thought, I wouldn't like to be around this guy. But in the same way, Tony McCoy, greatest jump jockey ever to have lived, was an awful prick for years and only became the greatest through being a prick. The Eamon Dunphy, would he kill your granny? Jordan would have killed everyone's granny. And I imagine that the protection and the cocoon around the smiling, earringed, I want to be like Mike type character, and how that facade has been gently chipped away at, especially with that ESPN magazine piece some years ago. I wondered if what you guys thought about was the hesitancy around fully exploding that myth.
Well, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that, Kieran, because I would say that you would have been a massive Jordan fan and still are a huge Jordan fan. I think I certainly, like when you mentioned the old ESPN piece, for example, and the Sports Illustrated pieces that eventually stopped Michael Jordan from speaking to the magazine for a certain amount of time, I certainly came to Jordan with a 3D view. Like, I don't necessarily remember the up-and-coming Michael Jordan and him becoming my sporting hero, for example. So I'd be keen on your take on that, Kieran.
I don't think Jordan, I think Jordan came out recently and said, look, people aren't going to like me after this. And I think people that aren't going to like him probably aren't those that have been inside the inner sanctum of a dressing room or within a team or even a business that are trying to go somewhere and trying to be excellent and trying to achieve excellence. And you see very quickly from even Jordan's upbringing, from the dad, go back into your mom. You don't know what you're doing out here. Let Larry work with me. Go back in with your mom. You don't have a clue. Telling him he can't do something. That's the way Jordan was taught how to deal with things, from just a very idealistic point of view about how to deal with people. His dad was hard on him. So what happens? Jordan has a lot of affection for all these guys. He knows he needs them to win something, but he knows deep down that if they are to be great and what it takes to be great, they're going to need to be thick-skinned. They're going to be able to take stuff. And yeah, I don't think Jordan not releasing this documentary was about people not liking him. More so the fact that when the Warriors, and I know LeBron when he won that championship, but still LeBron only had 3 championships, I think, at that stage. And it's, I would say it was that Golden State Warriors team with Durant and Draymond Green and Curry and Klay Thompson, and they broke the Bulls' record, and they looked like they were going to be like this dynasty and this unbelievable team before Durant left. So it was around that time, I think, when David Silver approached Jordan again, or he was approached, and I think almost gave him the green light, just to let everybody know, yeah, they're good and they had a good story, but like nothing beats winning 3, retiring for 2 years, letting somebody else win for 2 years, and coming back winning 3 in a row. And who's to say? And I know there would have had to be in a rebuilding process, but who's to say? And who'd back against Jordan getting his team over the line, both in '94 and '95? So. Very possible to have 8 in a row, which would be obviously unmanageable. So I think for Jordan, I think it was more about kind of put this out here, lads. The time is gone now. The dust is settled. I'm my own. I really don't think Jordan's worried. Jordan doesn't have much interaction with the public, and his brand is so iconic and so built up by now that a few arguments or a fist fight with Steve Kerr, people say, "Oh, geez, that's bad." But again, when people say that's bad, they're people I don't think that necessarily were in a dressing room where you're trying to win. Because if you had the cameras around,
but that's the vast majority of people, right?
Yeah,
that's the vast majority of people.
It is. And but what I'd be trying to say to those people is, inside in the dressing room or outside in the pitch when you're training, you're fighting for a spot or you're fighting for a championship. Fellas come to blows and fellas go to fisticuffs or whatever happens. It's always seen as in the greater good. He's keeping him on his toes, and he called him out. He was right to call him out, and he has been doing that in the last few games. Whatever you need to nip them things in the bud. It's not like the world we live in now, where you can kind of say, I won't say it to him, I'll go away and I'll put it on the WhatsApp group later on. I think it's always more effective when you call the guy out straight away. And I think Jordan was obviously did that his whole career. His competitive edge was more than anybody that's ever played the game. And I don't think he was holding this because. And maybe you might be right, because maybe his brand is so big now. Maybe if they'd have released it in '98, his brand might have taken a hit. But I really don't think so at this stage.
That thing you say about Jordan telling us that you're not going to like us after this documentary, I think that is a badge of honor for Michael Jordan. He is really proud that you might actually come away from this thinking that this guy went to all sorts of level to be the competitive beast that he was. I don't think this is necessarily something that Michael Jordan would be saying, "Oh, I'm ashamed of how I've come across here." Like what we've seen in the first couple of episodes, him being a bit of a dick in training, teaching Luke Longley how to execute fairly basic defensive maneuvers, for example, shouting at his teammates. Like, this is a Jordan-approved documentary. Is this not all the stuff he wants us to see, to put forward the incredible competitor that he is?
Yeah, I suppose to some extent, yeah. But I think that that's taken years. And the incredible, it was nearly cartoonish, the image we were meant to have of him. That there was, I think the documentary shows us exactly how different sports were on so many levels through so many eras. From the cocaine traveling circus of the 1984, like that blew my mind out my ears when I first read about that. And then his account of that hotel team party where there was all sorts taking place. From that point, him being an isolated figure, it really kind of it let us see once and for all that wasn't just a myth, that happened. He'd no part in it, but how different things are now. I remember reading in Blood on the Horns is the book that Roland Lazenby wrote about this season. And if people are looking for outside reading off the curriculum stuff, get that book. It's absolutely unbelievable. And it also details exactly what Scottie Pippen said to Jerry Krause when half pissed on the team bus. It also details how Jordan used to drink a six-pack after every game on that bus, literally down them one after the other. And it reveals exactly how much sports has changed in terms of the media intrusion and how you used to be able to cultivate an image that could be nearly cartoonish in its sheen of smile and sparkle. And nowadays, with the proliferation of cameras, tweets, phones, you just can't do that. You need a 360-degree view of your athlete. So if anything, I think you're right that he's probably trying to catch up with that 360-degree idea that he was human too.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like, I think the one that definitely, I think you mentioned Babe Ruth already here, Jarlath, and it's Michael Wilbon who brings that up as one of the talking heads early doors, describing him as the ultimate sports alpha male. I wonder if that's actually the ideal personification of how Jordan wants to be remembered. I don't know what you think. Like, it seems like not necessarily a complimentary thing to say about somebody anymore.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean about. I really don't care. I really don't think he's too worried that people are going to look at him in a negative light after this. And like Jarlath's right, like the sign of the times, Bird and Magic saved the NBA. The NBA before Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came along was a joke. It was. I don't know if you've seen the movie Semi-Pro, but that's what you're talking about. You know, the lights went off and the commercials came on, and fellas started fighting each other. Drugs were everywhere, drink was everywhere. The league was seen in a very negative light. Predominantly black players playing, nobody, poor enough crowds going to games, and you know, the Burden Magic phenomenon brought it into every day. You know, I think the NBA finals weren't even shown live until Burden Magic came along to the finals. I think all NBA finals were shown like the following day. Like, we got the documentary this morning instead of the boys in America last night. So I think Jordan was the next level up in that. So when Jordan comes in 84, you know, Magic and Larry are only in since 79, 80 maybe. So they've only had 4 years. And it actually, it personifies how badly Scottie Pippen got caught financially, because the league was at such a low ilk when he signed, like 90, he even signed that deal in 91 or 90. It just shows you that the league was still, you know, the revenues and the jump up in pay was astronomical from 1987 to 1997. And yeah, I think them times were, you know, they were pre, as Jarlath said, they were pre-Twitter and pre-everything, and fellas could do really what they want. Nobody had cameras out. Once the paparazzi weren't in there, guys could do what they want. They could drink what they want. They could do, you know, they could do anything. They were bulletproof. And much of society lived like that. If you looked at the George Best of that era, or these guys, you know, even you know, fellas could cut loose that bit more without the worry of being a constant role model, or someone snapping a picture of you, you know, falling around the place drunk or whatever. So I think back then they were left to their own devices once they were doing their job, and nothing personifies more that than Dennis Rodman. And this is 97. This isn't even 84. Rodman is over in Vegas, doing God knows what, and lands back for, you know, game 5 or game 6, no problem, boys. I was out till 5 o'clock in the morning. So
that's probably the thing I'm looking forward to most is the Rodman episode. I mean, if you see, like, I felt like Scottie Pippen is someone I've always felt was never given his due. And yeah, the Rodman thing is really, now I'm really like, well, the 30 for 30 about him was incredible itself, but how is this going to cover it? Like, Jason Hare to me is the biggest winner out of this, because his, you know, what he's created and the elegance with which he did it, in painting the picture, like Kieran says, painting that picture of this league that was struggling. And also, lads, what did you make of how the impact, if you think about it, Michael Jordan only really came to Ireland in 1992. Like, he was in the league nearly 10 years at that point. But when the Dream Team arrived, everyone in Ireland knew who he was. But the impact within weeks, like, I thought it was incredible to see the empty stands in Chicago, a stadium, empty seats in games 1, 2, and 3. And by the third week, they're sold out for the season. Like, George Best is a really good comparison, because it electrified everyone he went to, everywhere he went. If you read the Phil Knight book, the impact that it had on Nike was they took all of their money and put the bet on him. Such was the absolute magnetism of his game, that they went and took every endorsement from every other basketball athlete and said, give it to him. What did you make of that as just the kind of meteorite hitting this sport? And in the space of a few weeks, he's one of the top players in the league.
It's so true, because you look at Chicago now, it's so easy to pigeonhole it as the city. You look at the slew of franchises they have, storied franchises, and presume that he just came in and sort of revived this ailing franchise. But it wasn't like a dormant volcano. It was a hole in the ground when he got there, basically. And as they hilariously pointed out, there was an indoor soccer team that was outselling the Bulls at the time. So I thought it just showed that he didn't just come in and sort of light the spark again. He basically built it from the ground up. And from a personal point of view, similarly, when he went to college, he wasn't the number one guy straight away. As in most instances, you have to start from scratch. And I presume elite sports people are so annoyed at the prospect, or the notion that this word talent, that they're just born with these natural gifts. Like, he had to work at it. And if it was nowadays, and you saw what happened with Garnett, and you saw what happened with Kobe, that like they were one and done, like straight out of high school, and also now in college, he basically play 1 year and you're gone. His second year of college was so fundamental to his development. It primed him to be the NBA star that he was. So I think he, like, as much as he wanted to show the impact he had in Chicago, he also wanted to show that this wasn't a fluke. Like, he had to work. As talented as he was, this was also a personal project.
And I think that's why he was so pissed off with Jerry Krause wanting to, to tear it all down and rebuild it up. And he's got this line where he wants a sense of respect for the people who laid the foundations for this organization to be successful. That they should have some say in how this plays out. And I think that's what his major beef was, as you rightly say. He went there and it was a hole in the ground. And by the time he finished, it was the greatest story in sport at the time. The Bulls, when Jordan finished after getting the second three-peat, I don't see how many more teams were more famous around the world than Chicago. And as you said, they were indoor soccer crowds having more people in the stands before that. So I think that's why it bears out that he's so negative towards Jerry on that aspect of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned the traveling cocaine circus, as it's mentioned at the start of Jordan's era, and how his allowance for the antics of Dennis Rodman almost represented a full circle of the behavior of NBA players off the court, and to how Michael Jordan was the loner who railed against this entire culture at the start, and then ends up compromising for a guy. I'm not saying for 1 second here, by the way, that Dennis Rodman was on some sort of traveling cocaine circus, but I am saying that he was like going to Vegas in between games, that he was doing things that were not becoming of a professional athlete, I would say, at the time. But Michael Jordan
leading the league in rebounds, though. That's the difference. If the traveling cocaine team, the circus, were winning games, and let's not forget, he wasn't railing against anybody. He turned a blind eye and isolated himself and became a loner. He wasn't standing up and going, "I'm going to call out these drug fiends." He was fine with Rodman because he was absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, the greatest rebounder the game has ever seen, and he was producing. I would imagine that the second he didn't, he would have heard about it, and that would have been the centerpiece of this. The miraculous part in the Rodman story was the burning of the candle at both ends, the dragging of him out of nightclubs to show up at practice, get on a exercise bike to get warmed up and enter the game, still bleary-eyed from the night before.
It's going to be interesting. It's something that I hope we get to see in full glory next week when we get into the Rodman story. I just find it very interesting that is the bookending of Jordan's career, that there is something slightly comparable between those two situations. The other thing, I know it seems like an unbelievably obvious thing to say, but one thing that really kind of stuck out to me from this week's documentary is just how quickly this all happened for Jordan. Like, people talking about a matter of weeks between him kind of walking into the team and clearly becoming the best player on the team, him rocking up to the coach at UNC saying, "I'm going to be the GOAT," this sort of thing, and actually backing it up so quickly that his talent was so evident to people immediately. It was not a slow burn, because Jordan at that age was on an almost vertical trajectory. And I don't think I'd fully appreciated that at the time. It should be an obvious thing, but it was only really fully something that was hammered home after watching this last night, that there was a situation where Jordan went from somebody who rocked up to these teams to being a contender for one of the best players UNC had ever seen, to then quickly becoming one of the best players the Bulls franchise had ever seen, before it becomes obvious that the NBA is dealing with its greatest ever player. Like, that order of events is incredibly close together.
Yeah, I think they depicted it that way.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. Like, you have to consider that when he was in Laney High School, the growth spurt that he had, it was always going to take him a bit of a time to adapt. When you grow that much in basketball, when you grow that much as a basketballer, and something similar happened to me. I was the smallest player in the European Championships at 16, and I was playing midfield for the Kerry minors a year and a half later at 6'4". So that growth spurt is similar, and it does take a while for your body and for you to actually get used to being 6'4" when you were used to being 5'10" or 5'11". And I think when Jordan went to UNC the first year, I think that game-winning shot, obviously, like, the confidence you get off of that. Them college games were the largest watched sporting events in the States at the time, the NCAA college final. And I think coming out into year two, like, it's where he really started, as you say, Owen, starting to tell people, look, I'm going to be the best. I want to be the best. I'm going to work harder than anybody else. And he did, and he perfected all of that. And, he had the athletic ability, he had the size, in those early years, it's how long he's hanging in the air. I think we saw like 8 or 9 up and unders in that rookie season where he's just jumping from one side of the baseline where any mere mortal is trying to lay it up at the basket, whereas he's able to just hang there for that extra second. Everybody else lands and he comes up the other side and spins it in off the glass. His athletic ability and his complete desire to be great and to be brilliant is what kind of catapulted, I think, that growth spurt. The growth spurt catapulted that for him, I would say. And, you know, if Michael Jordan stays 5'10" forever, we never hear from him. That's probably the facts of it. But being able to get to 6'4", 6'5", and then get in with Dean Smith, and as you say, get a great education. And some people that annoy me with the stats in the NBA and is Jordan the best? And they forget Jordan spent those years in college. They forget he took 2 years out in the prime of his career. They forget that he retired again after the last dance. And he could have certainly played another few years getting 30 points a game. So it is that always pees me off a bit. But I think what you're talking about, Owen, is that growth spurt that he had in later on in his high school days set him up for the college story. Had a great final year in high school and set him up for North Carolina. And obviously after the tryouts, they knew they had their guy. But I would say his development as a player, we often forget that in the GA. You know, a guy is a minor, or if he's not a minor, oftentimes fellas never get to see the light of day again, where it shows you that you actually develop more probably between 17 and 20 than you do between 14 and 17. And certainly that second period of growth for Michael Jordan as a basketball player between the age of 17, 18 and 20 years of age, he was ready to go, and he was ready to come in and do what kind of surprised you a bit last night when you were watching it, was come in and be the man. And you saw no more of that than against the Milwaukee Bucks when they were down 9 in that third game, and he was just cut loose and ended up winning them the game. And I think the veterans were saying, geez, this rookie won't let us lose a game this year. Do you know what I mean? So that growth spurt for me is fascinating from them 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, and then almost one of the lines when he comes into the NBA is that he's not going to carry a team in the NBA because he's not 7 feet tall. And that kind of speaks to where the league was at the moment and how basketball is played.
Yeah, I think that that whole 7 foot thing makes the Rockets and the Trailblazers 2 of the biggest losers from these first 2 episodes, because still to look back and go, yeah, they wanted to travel.
Elijah One was the man, really, though. Like Elijah One was probably always number one.
Yeah, true. I mean, Elijah One does go on to be a Hall of Famer and an MVP. But there's definitely got to be someone in there.
It was the Sam Bowie trade, and like can you imagine if Portland got Jordan then, and you could have played Drexler like Drexler was 6'7", 6'6". You could have played Drexler like a Scottie Pippen type, and Jordan would have came in and moved Drexler up to the small forward. But that would have been an unbelievable dynamic, and who knows what would have happened after that if Jordan did go to Portland that time. But they needed a big guy, and they went with Sam Bowie, who was 7'2", and as you rightly said, you even hear Larry Bird talking about it, I think in episode 2, about we'd Robert Parrish, we'd Bill Walton, we'd Kevin McHale, and we had myself.
Dennis Johnson.
Yeah, but they had 5 or 6
Massive
guys
lads
that were 7 foot, 6'11". Larry Bird was 6'9". So that was their front court. But obviously height was the game was played much more walk it down. It's totally different today. The big man's gone out of the game completely today, but back then a big man was everything. Which is why the Bulls got lucky and got Jordan at 3.
So Reinsdorf for me, right? Jerry Reinsdorf comes off as like a really honest man in this, and very much like there's a 10% chance. Oh God, we couldn't have Michael taking that risk. I think he's really, really been got off lightly here. And maybe in the subsequent episodes, we're going to learn more. Because Reinsdorf, let's face it, he could have fired Krause. I mean, if Krause is causing all these problems, you're in charge. Fire the guy who everybody hates. And the biggest storyline and the biggest plot arc that I'd imagine is going to run is this Krause thing, this Jerry Krause, or Crumbs as they used to call him, and the kind of initiation of bullying or workplace bullying by Michael Jordan on this man. And we saw it a couple of times in the comments about his height. I know of way more of this stuff from reading these books where the abuse that he used to get on the bus was that the bus used to go a lot faster before you got on the bus, Jerry. Like, comments constantly, never missing an opportunity to take a dig. And, you know, I mean, Kieran, you know as well as anybody, there's whipping boys in every locker room. There's always someone who kind of likes to play a bit of the clown and doesn't mind soaking up some of the flack. But this wasn't that. This was actual, as we could see, even in the first 2 episodes. There was hatred that boiled over to the point where Scotty abuses him on the bus. And Phil Jackson, Sherry Krause's maybe biggest opponent, steps in and says, that's too far. Have you, am I the only one who saw this as like the kind of central pillar of the whole story?
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to become a huge thing as well. Like, it's interesting what you say about Reinsdorf, that he got off interesting. I have that as a loser from this episode, and I think that the Jordan headache analogy just sticks a pin in Jerry Reinsdorf immediately in the center of episode 2 here, that you kind of do see him wandering along, getting away with a little bit of murder, I think it's fair to say, as a talking head in this. I just think the headache analogy, the whole how bad is the effing headache line for Michael Jordan when he's replicating this conversation is something that kind of kills him in the middle of this. But the Krause...
I didn't think Michael got the analogy there, just for a sec. I don't think Michael got the analogy because, you know, the analogy was a headache, right? But how bad is the headache? The headache is the end of your career. That's how bad the headache is. And, you know, Reinsdorf on the one hand there looked to me like he was taking care of his player and his franchise, because let's not forget Sam Bowie did sustain a similar leg break that simply wouldn't repair because he went back playing on it too soon, and like that was the killer for me. It was like, Jordan did go back playing on it too soon. Like, he could have ended his career. He snuck off to North Carolina and played without permission. Like, I was like, oh my God, this is the smartest athlete of all time. Like, you fucking idiot. You could have blown everything by just being too thick-headed as to take the time off.
And it's interesting when you kind of put that in along with the thread of him describing Scottie Pippen as selfish then over the course of delaying his surgery in that summer. It's interesting. Like, I would definitely have been on the other end of that fence, Jarlath, in that argument, as in Jordan came out on top in that analogy. Now, of course, if I'm the person with the career on the line, am I saying, yeah, I'm going to take the 10% chance? Of course I'm not, because it's my career. But we're sitting here a couple of decades later and we're like, oh, beautiful theatre, amazing. That it is, after the fact, it is the beauty of hindsight that I'm able to sit here and say, well, Jordan killed Jerry Reinsdorf in that particular exchange, because, of course, if it had gone the other way, we'd be reading a documentary or reading a book or watching a documentary about how Jerry Reinsdorf warned Michael Jordan, the greatest prospect in the NBA, that his career could have been over.
True. I don't know what you guys took away from Krause not appearing. That was one standout for me, was that Krause he didn't submit to an interview for this, which is something that I think is kind of glaringly missing from this, because he's just going to get pounded over and over and over again as the thing goes on, as the guy that destroyed the Bulls. I wonder, is there any prospect for him appearing as a sympathetic character? Or is it just as they presented in episodes 1 and 2, that this man had a small man complex and couldn't get out of his own way, couldn't get out of his own ego, and couldn't get away from this idea that, hey, I had a big part to play in getting these championships. Organizations win championships, not players alone, which is the word that he was missing. I don't think that changes it too much. If I could talk to Jerry now, I don't think that word changes it too much, because your organization hasn't won a championship since. If you're claiming it's the organization that wins championships, not players alone, well, you're crummy at that as well. What did you think about him not appearing?
I don't think it was good that he didn't appear, but I come back at you a small bit on a few of them things. Look, Jerry Krause, he tore the mountain down in the end, but he did build up 2 of them. two squads, and he did make moves. Like, he made moves for players, and he took chances on players, and most of them worked. And I would say a lot of the footage where we're seeing kind of the bullying by almost Scotty and Jordan is at the stage where he's already told them that Phil, they already know Phil's last year. Scotty was obviously having issues with what contract he was on, how much money he was. He wanted to get more. He wanted to be healthy to get more. And Jordan wanted to win. And they were sick of Jerry at that stage. But he is the guy that put the pieces in place around Jordan. So, but I think it just went very sour at the end. And if you think of Jerry Krause in 97 and someone says, well, look, we're doing a documentary and all this, will you be a part of it? You can see him in 97 kind of saying, no, lads, I'm all right, I'll leave you at it. Because, it's probably a no-win situation. He knows Phil's going to be going after him. He knows Jordan's going to be going after him. He knows Scotty's going to be going after him. It's probably a no-win situation.
And he lost. Like, he did lose, Kieran. Like, he doesn't get to go, oh, but, we wouldn't have won that championship in 2006 and 2007 if I hadn't made that decision. He doesn't have any silverware to prove that he was right to do this. And the whole...
But he did it in the middle. Like, he did it in the middle as well. So, like, they had the first 3 championships. Jordan retired. Scotty was left there by himself. And like in the space of 18 months, them 2 rosters are completely different. There's very few, it's a complete haul over, and they win 3 in a row again. So in Jerry's little small man complex world, he was probably going, yeah, good luck, Scotty. I'm going to get in some, new guy in off the bat that's going to be as good as you, and we're going to pay him less, and we don't have to pay you this big max contract. You can go off somewhere else and get that. No, we're after bleeding you for 6 years on 18 million, and you've won 6 championships. You couldn't actually strike a better deal. So in his head, that's probably what he's thinking. And when you say Jerry Reinsdorf should have fired him, Jerry's probably sitting back there going, hold on, no, a minute, this guy's rebuilt the squad. He built 1 squad, we won 3. Jordan retired, he had to rebuild it all again, we won 3 more. These guys are all a bit older, we're going to have to rebuild. Who else are you going to look for to rebuild your squad other than Jerry at that moment in time? Nobody. Yeah, of course it didn't work out, but how many franchises in the NBA does it not work out for? You're taking a shot often now on an 18 and 19-year-old. If you're getting a low pick draft, it's often these one and done guys or guys that are coming straight from high school. It's very rare a fella that's played 4 years of college is going to go in the top 10. So you're taking a chance on kids who've never got any. Right?
Here's the other thing. In New York right now, James Dolan is the example of someone that no one wants to play for.
Yeah.
I mean, Krause had done so much damage to player relations through his behaviour and Reinsdorf's behaviour together, that they were essentially the Knicks by the time this was done. No one was going on for various reasons as well. Obviously, nobody wanted to fill Mike's shoes and knew that the city was basically in mourning for the next 5 years. But Dolan is a good example of a GM who, Kevin Durant going to the Brooklyn Nets along with Kyrie Irving was proof that you can, through your poor relations with players, make it impossible for you to get new ones. I guess I know it's fanciful for me to say he could have just fired him, but I just felt like Reinsdorf didn't own up to his own involvement in these things. Like, if I sign a contract with a player, I don't want to hear from you until the end of the contract. Bullshit. You are in an unbelievable situation here, and you have maybe the greatest 2 of a 1-2 punch ever to play the game. You paid him peanuts and agreed a 7-year deal that you advised him not to sign. Just renegotiate the contract. Just have him in. All that Scotty stuff, all the ankle stuff, his creation. 100% his creation, by not throwing the arm around him and going, you're special and we love you. Here's your new contract. Like, it would happen now. Like, we know that. We know that a player like Fred VanVleet, an undrafted player for Toronto, can have an amazing NBA Finals and then go, I think we need to take another look at that contract of yours so that nobody else gets you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it's an interesting one. Like, when we're getting into winners and losers here, there's no question that Jerry Krause is going down as a loser after the first 2 episodes of this. Like, no question about it. I think the obvious point to make about Jerry Krause is that he's obviously not around to defend himself, and that is the main thing. Like, obviously they would have started this years and years ago, and they have some archive interview, and still, it kind of feels like, I'm not sure, are you familiar with that scene in Game of Thrones when everybody turns on Jon Snow and ends up stabbing him a million times? That's kind of how this feels on Jerry Krause over the first 2 episodes of The Last Dance. It is brutal, it is people piling in on him, but there is probably a lot of truth in what is said. That being said, like, there is talk about, what's the exact line? It's magic when he says Michael Jordan needed to ride horses with him. And like, you only get to ride horses with you if you've got a decent GM. And I think if you wanted to look for some sort of redeeming quality for Krause in these first 2 episodes, it's that he is the victim of bullying. Like, that is always a way of creating some sort of sympathy with the audience. Like, you want to do some layups, Jerry? We got to lower the rim. That's what Michael Jordan says at the end of episode 1. As a vertically challenged guy myself, I felt for Jerry at that moment as well. And I was like, poor guy, that you could target someone's height like that. For me, he's like absolutely stone cold loser from the first 2 episodes. Unfortunately, it's probably brutal at times, but I accept that the dissolution at the end is probably his fault.
Yeah, the French lad who didn't get the autograph.
Yes,
I'm not sticking up for bullies for 1 second, but you know, I think Jordan and Pippen come by 97, 98 season would have thrown Jerry Krause off the bus if they could have got a chance on a highway. So you know, I think that level of what we saw in the documentary, I'm not sure that went on for the 8 or 9 years that or the 10 years at that stage that Jordan was there, more 13. But you know, I think at that stage, I think Pippen could have choked him physically in front of everybody, and obviously Jordan didn't like what he was doing. And then you're telling the greatest coach of all time, I don't care if you win 82 games this year, you're not being re-signed next year.
That's the one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, ultimately, from a ownership point of view, it came down to, you know, Krause or Jackson in the end. And Krause basically decided that the only non-drag and drop element of the whole Bulls project was Michael Jordan. But he also knew that if Phil Jackson wasn't there, Michael Jordan was going to be there. So for whatever reason, I think basically to keep Michael Jordan in the building, they had to make whatever decision was necessary. And letting Phil Jackson go was crazy. And in terms of the winners and losers, Phil Jackson, I think the edit has been quite sparing on him so far. I'm sure there will be an in-depth episode with him. But he just comes across as, we haven't got much insight into his coaching yet, and I'm not sure whether there will be that much in the documentary, but his facilitating qualities are there for all to see. Like, when the Scottie Pippen thing is put to him that, were you mad that Scottie did his surgery at the start of the season? He said no, basically saying, I'm going to be glad to have him at the end of the season. So he had so many of these things to deal with. Rodman, we've touched on, the Jordan in the background management fracas, and then the Pippen contract wrangle. Like, Jackson had all these things on his plate, and he just managed to keep the plate spinning in the air. So I think he's come across as a big winner so far.
Yes, I think so. Have that down here. Because he backs Pippen, he goes down as a winner straight away. And let's talk about Scottie Pippen, lads. Winner or loser from the first 2 episodes? I think this is very much up for debate.
He's a complicated man. He's a complicated guy. And I really loved hearing about his upbringing, about the 2 paraplegics in his family and the stroke of his father, the fact that he was the equipment manager at his junior college, the fact that he grew those inches and took over and blew up. It made more sense of the decisions that Scottie made in his career that made me scratch my head. And when people slagged me for wearing his jersey, it made more sense. This is a fella who had a very, very tough road in life, had survived, thrived, conquered against all the odds, and really become an unbelievable basketball player. Like, it's not stated enough, and Mike said it as well. It's just not said enough. When he left, you know, they nearly went to the finals with Scottie leading the team. He led the team in every category. He was a freak in himself, and obviously when you're sparring with Muhammad Ali every day, you're going to improve. But he took that opportunity, he did improve. You know, we learned so much about him And like you say, there's light and shade here, because that decision not to take the court when the play is called for Tony Kukoc, it's not covered in the documentary. Play is called for Tony Kukoc in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1994, the year Jordan was out. He refused to take the court, which, as Kieran would tell you, that's as sacrilegious as taking Mike out of the game with 9 seconds to go in the game on the line. And, you know, we're all human. And he made that decision, and I could never understand it. But having heard all this, I could kind of understand why his emotions boiled over when it came to, I'm just trying to take care of my family. I'm just trying to look after my people, and I've worked hard and I deserve this. What did you think, lads?
Mm-hmm. Keen to hear your take. I'm personally of the view here that Pippen was a loser from this episode. Not that I think that that's the case. I think in general, I think that he was painted as such. One of the last things we hear is Michael Jordan describing Scottie Pippen as selfish. That is one of the last things we hear in episode 2. That is very much, for me, the full stop on the Pippen conversation in this story seen through Michael Jordan's eyes. So I certainly have him down as somebody who lost out.
I don't know. I find him a very captivating speaker, first and foremost. I always think he's very illuminating whenever he hits comments, even when he's trying not to give anything away about the behind the scenes. He always seems to in interviews down the years. So I like that. And also, to Kieran's point on Jordan earlier, like that growth spurt was very interesting. So he had the ball handling of a smaller player and then grew 5 or 6 inches, and all of a sudden was this big man with a great touch. So I thought that was interesting as well. And ultimately, the contract wrangle I didn't have a problem with. To what Jarlath was saying, that he had to look after his family, that's totally fair enough. And I always got the impression he never had a chip on his shoulder about his status in the building, like with the starting 5 or the Bulls or anything like that. It was about his status in the league, where he sees these guys far inferior to him on losing teams or unsuccessful teams, and like 121 players are better paid than him. And he's just thinking, at a certain point, ultimately 7 years, he was like, nah, that's not good enough. So I thought it was totally fair enough. He obviously could have gone about it a better way. I kind of laughed to myself at the notion that he got surgery before the season started. I think that was a bold move, but I think, as Jarlath said, there's shade to it, and I think people can fall down on either side for this one.
Well, Larsa Pippen, his ex-wife, has come out over the course of the last few hours and said, thanks for your concern. Scottie did okay. Career earnings, $109 million from Bleacher Report was a screenshot. She posted 31th ranked in all-time NBA. And it's really interesting that you actually mentioned that, Ronan, in terms of his view of himself within the wider league. I wonder if he was more comfortable just by his nature with not being the number one star in a team as well. Just that footage we have of Charles Oakley, does he have him in a headlock or something? He's saying you're the new kid in class or whatever. Yes. Like imagine Oakley trying to do that to Michael Jordan. Like, he probably accepted on his first day, but deep down would not take it whatsoever. Whereas it seems Pippen's actually kind of okay with this. He's okay with earning his stripes. Obviously comes from a big family. He's okay with the order in the dressing room, and by extension of that was happy enough to be second fiddle to Michael Jordan. Now, of course, that any sort of line of logic along that is just completely blown out of the water by the fact that Jordan is the greatest player of all time. So maybe that's why he fell into a happy state as his number 2, I guess.
Yeah, and it's so easy.
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead.
It's so easy for Pippen to be denoted as the punchline, and he often is. But like, as Jarlath said, when Jordan wasn't there, he did pretty okay. And then Jordan, as brilliant as he was, and it was shown in that other unbelievable montage from the Celtics game, like, Jordan struggled in the playoffs in terms of getting progression in the playoffs until Pippen came along. And it wasn't until, like, there's great trouble with the Pistons, which I'm hoping will be covered in this documentary, but like, it wasn't until Pippen sort of hit his stride, and even the pre-prime Pippen and the prime Pippen, it was only in those years that the motor really started moving and the Bulls started racking up championships.
Yeah, for sure. And just a couple of other things to box off here in our winners. Just
come in on Scottie, like, one of the best defensive players to ever play the game. And of course he was great at rebounds and assists and scoring as well, obviously. But you had Jordan and Pippen as your 2 and 3, and they were never blessed with great centres. He'd Luke Longley, he'd Wennington, he'd Bill Cartwright. He was never blessed with great scoring power forwards. Grant would average double figures, but Rodman obviously didn't. they were, you know, his hard-nosed defence, Scotty's defence is what endured him, I would say, especially to Jordan. And I don't think he'd the all-around game to fully carry a team to a championship, and nobody does by themselves. It's all about the second best player and the third best player of all these championship teams, and we even see that to this day. But I think as a number 2, I think it suited his personality. I think it suited his demeanour. I don't think he'd want to be Michael Jordan around the place. He strikes me as the guy from Arkansas, nice and quiet, country boy, do things right. And I think he was grand suited to being the second fiddle behind, as you rightly said, the best player of all time. And let him be the guy that is just plagued everywhere he goes. And Scotty, he's still on a winning team. He's still winning championships. And like we're talking about his contract, and he was underpaid, but still 18 million to his family, in 1991 is, and I can totally tell why he signed that, because you do hear of guys all the time getting injured or picking up a bad injury and they never play again. Whereas he wanted just to make sure that income was in there. So I don't pick him out as a loser out of this series, out of these first 2 episodes. But I just think, like, as a defensive hawk, I just know the length of him. Like, if he was on me in a game, you couldn't even get a shot off. You wouldn't be able to get a dribble off. This guy would be scalded all over you. And I think the main reason that a lot of people miss why they won these championships is Scotty and Michael defensively. For those 6 years, there was no 2 and 3 beating them. So it had to be your point guard or your centre from there, really, because the 4 was solid with Rodman and Grant. So I think them 2 as a defensive unit is possibly the best 1-2 punch of all time defensively.
Yeah, we're surely going to see the 2 of them double teaming Kukoc in 1992 in the next couple of episodes. That's going to be quite something to see. So I accept defeat on that one. I think you're all going for Pippen as a winner from that episode. I have him down as a loser. Just a couple of other things just to kind of go through. Is Michael Jordan a winner or loser from these first 2 episodes? Like, I think when you've got a couple of interviews being done with yourself, and you've got a nice glass of whiskey fluctuating in level throughout, and a cigar puffing smoke away, you're probably a winner.
He's the greatest winner of all time. Like, end of story.
There's no possible. Wait, hold on a minute. What about Michael Jordan, the fashion icon? Is that a winner or loser from this? The beret in Paris, is that a plus point or a negative point?
He was the coolest man on the planet.
He was selling his shoes in Paris. He'd wear whatever they want. If he was in Scotland, he would have wore a kilt. He's joking me. He's going to Paris, the fashion capital of the world. He was making sure that he was doing whatever. Yeah, he was doing whatever he could to sell more sneakers.
Yeah, I actually thought it was a backwards flat cap for years that he wore there, but it was actually a beret. Yeah. I thought it was one of those kind of Samuel L. Jackson efforts, but no, it was actually the beret. What I'm really dying to say, I do think he's a winner in it, but and I do think they had to set him up in these first 2 as, look at this rocket of pure talent, hard work, aggression and determination, so that the twists and turns that follow, we'll be ready for that, and we can come back to this, because look, there's some dark stuff coming. Like, if people are wondering where this goes from here, there's some really dark stuff on the way, including abuse of teammates, and including the gambling, and also these.
Are you calling him punching a teammate abuse?
Yeah, well, the punch on Steve Kerr is meant to be pretty legendary, that he laid him out as good.
He's not the only fella he punched in training, now I can tell you.
Yeah. Have you ever punched anyone in training here?
I have, and so has most other fellas that are that are trying to win something. You have to have that competitive edge. You have to have that, and you never wanted to get there, and people feel uncomfortable when it happens, but it's really happening for a reason. Like, it was very rarely a physical altercation. It would be more an argument that would lead to a physical altercation about something that we're trying to do to win a game. And I'm trying to get my point of view across, and you don't agree with me. Or I want you to do something and you don't want to do something. But Jesus Christ, myself and Manny used to be like 2 billy goats around the training session. We fell
second question. Let me follow up then. Did you ever do it at basketball training?
I did. I got headbutted in the basketball training session one day for going too far. So trust me, lads, this stuff is not I really don't want people to see Jordan.
I just thought there was a different code of ethics to GAA and basketball, because I would think that, yeah, like in rugby, there's going to be a certain level of physicality needed. But in basketball, the fact that elbows get thrown and all the rest and everybody gets catches. Yeah. But I can't believe you got headbutted. So you were the person that got headbutted for taking it for talking.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
We'll leave that off. But it goes. That's the way sport goes. Fellas are going at it, and this is my own teammate. So this was a guy at training. And this is what I'm trying to get across about training, is that it gets so amped, and this was a year we won the national championship in Ireland. So it wasn't like we were bottom of the table and everybody was just throwing their ties out of the Prem. We were being competitive and we wanted to be the best. And when you're going at it at that, and you're like, of course, rugby is the absolute probably peak physical game in the world, where it's like you might as well be going into war as going into it, because what you have to deal with physically on it. But basketball, you're down there, there's elbows flying, there's trash talk happening, there's digs, there's bad belts when you go to the basket, there's sneaky things going on, and then there's obviously the trash talk to hype it up. And then there's often, you're in a setting where crowds are on your back, they're really close to you, they're able to get in your ear, the court is only 94 feet long, so people are kind of really getting to the max on what can they hold their nerve for. And Jordan didn't go into that training session and say, I'm going to punch Steve Kerr today and I'll teach him a lesson. That was something that got there, and I don't know how it got there, and I'm sure we're going to see it, which is the exciting thing about this documentary. But in sport and in great teams, there's always fights, there's always arguments, there's always fellas going at it, and what happens with the great teams and the teams that go on and win is they go home and they sort it out and they come back better. They have a better understanding of what the argument was about, who was right, who was wrong, and they push on. I remember leaving. I was at a Tralee Tigers, and you're talking about getting my education. I was at a Tralee Tigers basketball session when I was about 14, and the two best friends that lived together were Vinnie Murphy and Roscoe Patterson. Roscoe Patterson was from Boston, great player. Vinnie was originally from Kanturk, playing in Tralee. The two boys were at it. Best friends. They drove to training. I was at every training watching them, and they used to get out of the car and I'd be there saying hello to them, and I'd walk out with them afterwards. They get into the car and go home, and my mum would collect me. This one night they tore the heads off each other around the court. Roscoe, a 6'5" black guy, punching Vinnie, and Vinnie giving as much as he could get back, and it was heated. And the following Thursday, I went up to Vinnie. I was 14. I said, "Is everything okay?" He was like, "Will you stop? We were playing Uno that night till about 3 o'clock in the morning." It was all sorted. So yeah, like it's teams that can get over that kind of stuff will be successful, and it's fellas that hang on to that kind of a bitterness towards the person that was trying to challenge them. And some people can't take it. I'm sure there's going to be lots of guys in this documentary that we'll see couldn't actually perform playing with Jordan. He'd be a bit like Roy Keane in that manner. He's so demanding of you, so in your face, and some people just can't respond to it. But the people that want to respond, and the people that want to get better, and the teams that want to get better will go along with it. And they'll challenge Jordan, and rightly so. He needs to be challenged too. He can't be the only guy challenging everybody. And I'm sure fellas did challenge him. But when you're as good as he was, and you're as smart as he was, and you're as competitive as he was, he can't let something go if it thinks it's going to affect him winning a game. He's going to have to call you out on it. And that's what all the greats in every sport, that's exactly the way they're built. It's the way Kobe Bryant was built. It's the way Roy Keane was built. They're going to challenge you. They're going to call you out and shit that you're not doing to help me win a game. And if that's selfish, I'll take it. But that's the way it has to be. And I think that's the way Jordan seems to kind of will come across, and it'll probably get worse at stages going down the line. But I think people will always have to revert their mind frames back. People that haven't been in a high pressure situation or haven't been a part of a very successful winning team will have to try, and that's why I'm talking like this. So for those people that haven't been there, kind of go, okay, well, yeah, maybe he's got a bit of truth in that, rather than looking at this and going, oh my God, Jordan was a prick. He punched this little white guy called Steve Kerr. There's more to it than that.
Before we wrap, Jarlath, did you crack out a fresh pair of Air Jordans for watching the documentary earlier?
Like, I don't know, sometimes, right, I get really like disillusioned with the commercialism and the materialism behind the whole thing. I know this isn't the answer you wanted. You wanted me to say, yeah, these ones, right? But like, there is another aspect to this, which is just how much the wealth and the attainment of things and materialism went hand in hand with all of this, and how it kind of built a consumerist ideal around achieving in sports and excellence for young people that we see now actualized in our culture and society, whereas Phil was the spirit and was that metaphysical notion of the wheel and the parts within it and all the spokes being important for the wheel to turn, that he kind of took it up to a higher place that I now am much more interested in. And a lot of all of that stuff and the silly amount of Bulls memorabilia that I own now, I kind of look at it like, what was I doing? Like a lot of the
Really?
Bull stuff that I own now. I realize now because my parents, my family couldn't afford it, and it was a sign that I was doing well if I could have the thing that I wasn't allowed to have when I was younger, and I kind of understand it that way now. But that said, I got dressed in a full Bulls uniform and went down and played the music and announced myself into the room.
Listen, it's been a pleasure, lad. It's been a pleasure watching this documentary. Ronan, we might leave the last word to you. What are you expecting to see next week? What are you hoping to see next week in episodes 3 and 4?
Well, just more of the same. Like, I don't think they need to ram it home because there's a 10-part documentary, so that kind of explains it. But like some of the way the people were talking about Jordan, Larry Bird said that wasn't a basketball player, that was God dressed as Michael Jordan. bigger than the Pope, closest thing to God on earth. So more of that kind of stuff, more of that hyperbole. Yeah. I'm all for that. And a bit of Phil Jackson as well. Like we mentioned earlier that it was kind of little bits here and there, but I think it'd be nice to get a bit more in depth because he's as interesting a part of this story as anybody.
I love the confidence of Jordan when he's playing golf with Danny Ainge that day, and one, to be playing with Danny Ainge, and then two, to tell DJ lace up his boots tomorrow. I'm going to give him some numbers, and he goes out and gets 63 points. And a story like that, he walked into the Atlanta Hawks dressing room in his suit one day. They were all getting ready to get tagged out for a big game, and he walked into the dressing room. He looked around at all of them. They're all like, "What are you doing in our dressing room, man? You're in the wrong dressing room. Get out!" And he looked down at Dominique Wilkins, who was a massive player at the time and very famous, one of the best dunkers of all time. And he said to Dominique, "Lace him up good tonight because I'm going to give it to you tonight." And he 51, And as Dominique kind of was saying when he was telling the story, it was like, one, to have the balls to come in and say that, to let us know that he's going to give us numbers. So then we'd all say in the dressing room, well, there's one thing that's going to happen tonight now, lads. Jordan is not getting big numbers. But this Jordan still goes out and gets 51, even warning the team. Normally you'd be saying, "Oh, well, I'm sick today and I don't feel great, and then now I'm going to get 51. But to go into the dressing room, look at all the guys in the eyes, look at their marquee player and say, "Lace him up good, Dominique. I'm coming after you tonight." And he goes, gets 51. The guy was from another planet. He's not human. He's not human.
Yeah, I think...
And he is the greatest of all time, and I'm going to say that at the end of every show in the next 5 weeks.
Well, if there's one thing that the next couple of weeks is going to do, it's going to hammer home that opinion, and all the LeBron or Kobe believers are going to be ground down. Just like you mentioned Danny Ainge there, just one final thing for me is that montage of the 63-point game. I loved that so much. It's so simple, but like I think it was LL Cool J was the soundtrack in that particular montage. It was just so perfect. Like, I know it's simple, and the hard part is getting the good stuff out of the interviewees, but nothing beats an ESPN montage on a documentary like this. It is the beating heart of these series. I loved it so much. Lads, it's been great chatting to you. Hopefully we'll do it same time next week. Jarlath, Kieran, Ronan, this has been Off the Bull. Same time next week. Good luck for now.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Looking for a football...